Greetings and welcome back to another discussion. I am joined today by the now legendary Kangaroo Lord huMAN. Now, huMAN has a YouTube channel, a fast-growing YouTube channel that will soon eclipse mine. He's a legend in his own right. He produces MGTOW content, very colorful, pictorial MGTOW content, and he's joining me today from the far-flung reaches of the Empire of Oceania. Partially pun intended there. But we're going to be talking about a wide variety of subjects today. We're going to be talking about, MGTOW, obviously, issues of conformity, the individual, and related subject matter. And with that said, I will welcome him. Thank you for joining me, huMAN.
Oh, thanks for having me, Stardust. Do you prefer being called Stardust or Thinking-Ape?
I don't really care. Either way. Either one's good. So,
yeah.
I'll as the guest, I guess I'll allow you to introduce the topic.
Oh, mine was really my question that prompted this chat with you, Stardust, was a message I posted to you in the past week asking, really, do you think the holy grail that many men are waiting for, that is like, I read in comment sections of MGTOW, sex robots and the artificial womb, where they think it would finally be the catch-all panacea that would, solve all of men's problems. That is, men being free of women completely. But rather than a simple utopian destination, I myself, I highly doubt it would solve men's problems. I think it would actually exacerbate them.
Well, yeah, and there are a number of issues attached to that. One, we can right off the bat say how difficult that would be to execute. Whether it's desirable or not, that's a separate question, but the technology just isn't there. Custodian actually did a video on this eons ago about how unlikely it is anytime soon to see anything akin to an artificial womb. Sex robots more plausible, but I guess the fundamental issue here is that for women, for the men who kind of hanker on about this subject matter specifically, or kind of what I would call in a perpetually red pill rage state, and there's obviously variation there, or I would maybe just say quite plainly fascinated by the topic of women in a way that I'm not, for example, or maybe some other people aren't, then precisely for those men it would not be a solution. And I'd say I'll give you the following reason. One, if it's merely an issue of sexual gratification, right? Well, frankly speaking, wanking off does the job. You wank it off, you get it out of your system, and you get on with your day, right? If it were merely about that, no. One thing sex robots I don't think would do is give these men, specifically these types of men, the kind of validation that they crave. So women are the source of validation for these men, and so a sex robot wouldn't do that, at least for this type of man. For other men, I think, if you're the type of man who just doesn't really find the subject matter of women particularly interesting, but obviously we're all kind of wedded to these stupid biological wants or needs or desires, then yeah, it might be a good thing. But a panacea, no, because I think most men, not all, but most men derive some sense of self or identity or validation from their relationship with women. To walk outside of that is, as I said in my video not too long ago, when I talked about the problem of philosophical course correction, that the red pill itself is not a panacea. It's not a solution for every man, and there will be losses that one accrues alongside with the gains that one accrues in taking the red pill. So it's just actually a far more complicated matter than saying, well, let's get those sex robots on the assembly line and let's get the artificial womb and fucking kumbaya, we're all happy folk now. It's vastly more complicated, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, and I've talked to a few people since your video about philosophical course correction, and I was surprised how many were resistant to it. They actually thought it was the solution, and once that happened, it would unburden men to a great degree, and not so much sex robots, but the idea that the red pill isn't for everyone. Most guys would say, but what are you talking about, human? You know, you talk about this stuff. You seem sort of fairly passionate about, red pill ideas and all this sort of stuff. But they think that it's better for men to, and I agree to some degree, it's better for people to know the truth, however painful it is. But then you look at someone, if their life was worse after ingesting the red pill, even if they would have some, a sense of apathy and not know what's going on, and now their world is miserable after being unplugged, I can't really say it was beneficial for that person. For the truth, it may be beneficial, but really, what does it matter if the person's life is miserable?
Well, as Jack Nicholson said in that ancient film, A Few Good Men, 92, 91, you're more ancient than I am, but in any event, he did say, you can't handle the truth. Well, yeah, and I didn't say that directly, but I alluded to something similar in that video, and I said, look, I can actually concede that if I had Iron Blue Pill, I probably would, in my totality as a person, as an individual, been more productive in many ways, and less productive in others, but in a more productive overall. And so it really depends. I totally agree with you that the red pill is not for everyone, just like every form of medication isn't for everyone. Say what you want about antidepressants, but some people will react well to them and interact well with them, and others less so. So there's a huge variation there. And so the idea that, and we can get into the reasons why, and I could suggest one or two here, the red pill is for everybody, is I think human beings have a natural tendency to look for, well, some people at least, universalist prescriptions and solutions to problems, whether they're real or ostensible. And then when you say, well, take the red pill, it sounds so simple. Of course, that's codified in a film like The Matrix, which, it is kind of a black and white issue there, or at least it's portrayed as such. But real life is, of course, filled with many more gray areas. It's far more complicated. And so you're not going to find a universalist solution in the red pill. And frankly, in my experience, people, I'm one of those odd guys who would just prefer to know the truth regardless of the outcome. I would prefer to actually be miserable and know the truth than to be happier and not know the truth. I'm weird, though, and I admit that. Most people aren't like that, so I think people are just looking for a universalist solution, and whether you want to call it the red pill or MGTOW or going your own way, whatever, it's definitely not for everybody. And I think most men, on a final note, particularly the ones that crave this female validation, and I would say the red pill wasn't a solution for them, because if it had been, they would have realized that, they would have had the mentality such that this whole reproductive game is just kind of silly. It doesn't really interest me. I'm just going to do my own thing. But you see in the comment section, or you listen to voices, and you hear quite the opposite. They're still, I would say, fascinated by female kind in a way that maybe you and I, and perhaps that's has to do with our relative antiquity, but we're just not. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
I'd agree with you. And one thing I'd note through what you said is, I think a lot of guys, especially in MGTOW, are looking for universal solutions to personal problems. Yeah. It's not a one size fits all. And I keep seeing this kind of friction in just even the language that's used in comment sections, and people kind of not so much questioning, but sort of not seeing my point of view, or seeing that you're not a real MGTOW, and my thing is it's not weird that you were saying that you're a weird person because the one size fits all doesn't sort of work for you. I think I've always said MGTOW only works for certain types of personality. It's the kind of personality that can't look away from the truth and can't pretend to put on a mask. A lot of people can, A lot, you've got a lot of married guys that, yeah, this is a situation. I know the truth, but what do you do? Whereas my mentality's always been, fuck no, I can't sleep. I can't operate. I feel like a fraud. I'm nervous. I'm anxious. I need to get out of here. I'm almost like I'm in an ill-fitting suit. So I just can't bury my head in the sand. I need to make sense of it for myself. There's only objective reality, right? But we all perceive it differently. So like my subjective perception, it may be so on certain issues, but I need to subjectively make sense of it. Whereas a lot of guys look for this. So for instance, I look at MGTOW. It's just an abbreviation for what the sentence is, a man going his own way. But most guys look at it as, an icon, a t-shirt, a catchphrase. Where it's literally like that. So when you see the language coming back and saying you're not a real MGTOW, or, do you think MGTOW men like this? And I've said in my videos, I've had some people comment and say, I agree with everything you say, but I just can't join the MGTOW group. And I'm thinking, fuck, there's nothing to join.
Yeah. Well,
it's not a group.
It's exactly a couple of things we've said. About over 2 years ago, I produced a video called "The Price of the Lie." It's one of my more popular ones. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I've got it on my phone.
Yeah, that's kind of signifies my view of just the whole fakery involved in social interaction at large. Not a fan of it. Needless to say, if I ran things in some hypothetical, fantastical world, there would be a lot less of these, a lot fewer of these pleasantries. But yeah, I think. This all goes back, and I have to admit, I participated in at the time. We have to be honest. This goes actually back, I think, in the context of MGTOW, at least the Sandman crisis, approaching about 4 years ago now, approximately. At the time, MGTOW was a kind of very niche-y thing. It had a certain sort of it was known as something, and people sort of understood it to be something. I tried to come up with definitions. I realized in retrospect I was certainly in error, and I think, at some point in time it was going to expand. And I'll be frank, fast forward, I don't even care whether I have that label or not. It just doesn't mean anything to me. And things expanded, and Sandman took off, and to this day I don't like Sandman or his content, but. And I thought it was amusing that he would complain about other people who basically capitalized on his ideas, and you get even more watered down stuff like your fellow kangaroo writer, MGTOW 101, who he doesn't even make his own content. He just uploads other news clips and puts text over it or whatever. But at some point in time, the labels just don't matter, and yeah, it isn't a formal club. I don't see it as, someone says, well, are you MGTOW? I say, well, I guess I am. So do this or don't do that. But I actually just don't really care about the acronym. I really don't.
I don't either, but I refuse to allow all these idiots to effectively not allow me to type in MGTOW into a search engine to sort of be among like-minded people and be able to throw away the political correctness and talk like a man about male ideas and how the world affects me. So that's the way I see it. It's not that, I'm with you on everything other than it's kind of like when you discover a cafe or a bar and then, because of social media and popularity, it gets hashtagged on, say, Twitter or somewhere, and then all these people flood in and ruin it. And it's like, do you leave the cafe that has really good coffee and just sit in your own corner and enjoy it? Or do you, are you forced out of something that's at its core really good? Mm. And so I see it as a shorthand to talk freely as a male and connect with the people that I'm simpatico with, rather than be sucked into this, we're not giving you a MGTOW badge. It's like, fuck off.
Yeah, I just, at some point in time, I just stopped caring about the label of MGTOW. Now, people could say, well, the reason why you stopped caring is because you don't make MGTOW content. You're an alt-right faggot. No, it's just I'm interested in the stuff I'm interested in, and some of it has overlap with you call it traditional MGTOW concerns, and other stuff doesn't, at least directly. But I'm not too concerned about that because I kind of do my own thing. And I think this, as I mentioned in that video about the illusion of individuation, I think now more than ever, mostly because of the internet is kind of a world unto itself. There's so many different groups and then factions within groups, and each one is demanding some level of conformity. We've seen this recently in the so-called skeptic community, where someone who had diverged from the manifesto, the official manifesto, was penalized and pilloried and sort of driven off. The actual, I'm not really interested in the skeptic community or really in the specifics of this bit of drama, but I am referring, of course, to this Rage After Storm affair with Crowd and Tea. But it doesn't really matter the exact content. The point is that in any group you're going to have demands for orthodoxy, and I admit I suppose back in the day, 3 or 4 years ago, I might have called for the same, but I've wisened up, and to this day, I don't like Sandman or his content, and I would never endorse him. But he's whatever. It's beyond my control, and I don't want. And here's the other thing: the kind of guy who watches his videos is not the kind of guy who's going to watch my video, so it doesn't really matter anyway. And he can go make his shitty nasally videos all he wants. It's just there's no concern of mine. And if people don't want to watch my videos, that's fine too. I've had plenty of people unsubscribe to me, call me all sorts of things in the past 2 years because I have, I guess, flouted the orthodoxy that had been demanded of me. But yeah.
Well, I think one important thing to touch on there, and you've sort of described it there in your illustration of just the things you've been talking about, is most men are continually stuck in a loop of going their own way from women, and they're continually stuck in that loop where you've actually gone your own way to something. And a lot of guys don't see that. So they'll say, oh, well, Stardust isn't producing much MGTOW content because he's talking about all this other stuff. It's like, well, that's precisely what going your own way is. It's like you go away from women and all the bullshit and you take your red pill and then you go to somewhere. And there's one or two, there's a couple of MGTOW content producers, the classic ones, of which you're one of the very few that's still around, that have, I'd say, gone their own way, like Barbarossa, and he's doing his own thing and he doesn't find a need to kind of, and that's ultimately where you want to get to personally. And I can understand the consumer side of someone who enjoys watching the content. You don't want them to go away. Like, I can personally admit I don't want Stardust to go away because I enjoyed, especially a lot of your earlier content helped me many years ago, like fill in gaps and put words to sort of unusual kind of feelings or things that didn't add up. And then it was like aha moments, and okay, it's kind of like a Tetris of the brain. It kind of like things fit into place. But I think most guys are just stuck in that freedom from women, and they like that feeling because don't forget that liberation. It's kind of like that the duality of feeling liberated, finally being free of prison and wanting to keep that feeling going for as long as possible, because once that euphoria settles, then you're out into the landscape in your own singularity.
Yeah. And
it's kind of it's very, very daunting. And most personalities, I contend, aren't for it. As you said, it's not for everyone, because I noticed that recently when I was talking to a family friend of mine, and him and I have great in-depth philosophical discussions, and my sister was listening to us, and we got onto this the kind of just the broad terms and broad aspect of the meaning of life. And him and I were talking enthusiastically, saying, yeah, life is meaningless. And isn't that great? The liberation is you can do anything you want. And my sister was really kind of shocked, saying, you guys are nuts. That's depressing. And it kind of struck me where a certain type of personality sees things as a liberating thing, whereas another one will see it the total opposite. as something that's depressing, that's beyond your control, and there's nothing you can do. And so the way you perceive comes into it. And a lot of people are just conformists. A lot of people like the idea of individuation and individualism. And it's sort of this carrot to go for. But then once they get it, or as you've mentioned, once they've climbed that mountain, then it's kind of like, oh shit, now I either have to go down the mountain the other side, and then there's a whole range of other mountains to climb, and I can't be bothered. I'd much prefer the mountaintop or the peak as a carrot rather than a destination. Although I'll fool myself and motivate myself to have something to wake up for every day. I want to climb that peak, but really, in a practical aspect, you don't, because let's look at it, all the past days of your life. You haven't really done much. You haven't taken many steps forward. There's not much proof that you will get anywhere. Your aspirations are lofty, but you haven't actually produced. There's not much proof that it's ever going to change. That the routines of your life, how you are, doesn't actually show that. Do you kind of know what I mean? Like, it's a great goal, but most people just like it as a goal, as a talking point. Similar to how when a lot of women go through divorce courts, they'll say, "I gave up my career as a woman. I would have been a CEO," and so they equate the money that should be remunerated.
I think people are often guided by visions and of what they might have been or what they will achieve. I'm the kind of person I don't think it's liberating or enslaving. It just merely is. I don't really think, reality is pretty neutral as far as things go. It's kind of indifferent. Well, it is indifferent to our individual suffering and our triumphs and our failures. But I think, particularly on the positive spectrum, yes, there are people who want it to be a certain way. And it's just a kind of MGTOW, or as you pointed out, the goals you seek to achieve, these sort of they're like highlight reels that you might sort of strive for. But once you get to that spot, it becomes very uncomfortable. So once again, I don't think the red pill and its oldest incarnation with regards to women is something that is for everybody. For a variety of reasons. Some men really, really want to reproduce, I've noticed, in a way that that desire is not manifest in me or in other men. Some men quite literally cannot live without women. I've noticed this because I'll get comments every now and then, and maybe there are these guys who just have not been subbed or listened for a long time, telling me that, after all these years, 6 or 7 years I've been around, people might know my personality a bit because, basically this is my personality, that I'm secretly, hoping for the Nawal that I'm holding out, and the reason why I talk about all the things I talk about, whatever the subject matter is, because I just can't get laid, and that's kind of funny after a good 7 years of content production and really making it clear what my positions are and how I am. No doubt there's been some evolution, but so I think, and these guys, but these are the type of guys who just cannot fathom such a thing. They can't understand it. And I think it's important.
If you ever did get married, I think that would be the biggest win to non-MGTOW out there, saying your biggest poster child there. He was full of shit. Look, he even got married. You guys are all just waiting for the Nawalt to come along.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's happening. I mean, it's theoretically plausible. I might date. I don't strive for that, but I would never get married. So yeah, I think that there got all these guys whose perspective there really isn't that much overlap, because they're in a place and they might always be in that place. It's just their constitution is such that they really want women, or maybe some guys really. I've had chats with guys on occasion and say, look, I agree, women suck. They're all these things, but I want children. Now, Women are the incubators of children, for better or worse, and so it means you got to deal with their shit if you want children. It's kind of one of those, all-inclusive deals where there's a lot inclusive that you would prefer not to be included, but you want to pop out those kids, then you got to deal with women. So it's there are a lot of different positions on the spectrum, but I guess the conclusion, as I said, as I've come to, is I don't feel any, to the extent that I did ever, maybe years ago, enforcing an idea of what MGTOW is. I just don't care. I don't care about labels. So people call me whatever they want. It just doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, they're basically kind of being, they're not allowing a conversation. They're already putting the foot down and not allowing an open discourse. But I wanted to talk. There's 2 points. I like the fact that you said women are the incubators, and not the creators, which I always have to remind people about when women say, we create life. I go, no, you don't. You just incubate life. You don't create anything. Men create the real things in life. And the second point I completely forgot.
Yeah, we ain't young no more. I wish I could read your mind to remind you of what that point was, but I don't think I'll be able to.
What was the most popular female song in the 90s was If You Could Read My Mind?
Oh, yeah. Well, one of those.
But that's right. In terms of people saying, you're just waiting around for the right woman, it's the default biological imperative. My mother still does it to me. It's kind of like a goldfish mentality where you forget what was said 10 minutes ago. And it's kind of like I just kind of nod and ignore. But it's saying that you're waiting for someone else to come around is, I think it's easy in a way. You and I have an advantage, Stardust, where we've both never had the desire really to have children. I know I've had. I often tell people when they say, how can you not? Like it's very strange to them. They often think it's an automatic desire, and I'm really peculiar in not wanting it. And I tell people the best I can kind of make you see it from my point of view, my rationale, asking me why don't you want kids would be analogous to saying why don't you want to be gay. The two are just not in me. I have zero interest. I have nothing against gay people. In the same way, I have nothing against people who are married and who want to have children. But I just have zero interest in it. I think it's just the pushing and prodding that tends to annoy me. I tend to be a live and let live kind of person.
Same.
And so when you get, whether it's women or advertising or, religious people kind of poking and prodding you, and when you finally say, I've had enough, and you get pissed off and they go, whoa, I've touched a button. You must really want to get married now. And it's like, for God's sake. Oh, I shouldn't have said for God's sake, but you know what I mean.
I get it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something like that, or, why do you prefer raspberries to blueberry? I don't think, obviously most human beings don't operate along those lines. And, I'm an introvert too, so I ultimately, as a rule, in general, not always, but most of the time, prefer silence to endless chatter and being surrounded by people. These are particular attributes that I have, and I think that's the same with wanting children and whether or not the kind of man who will be highly dependent on women for the rest of your life or not. It's kind of rolling.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a high degree of intellectual curiosity. I doubt whether somebody like yourself could be any other way. Even the fact that I see that you qualify a lot of what you say and think, even in your videos, to kind of make sure you're coming across right. And you've from what I hear in your videos and when you speak and when I talk with other people I can sort of have a conversation with, they tend to be able to see the other's point of view. So it's almost like a scientific thing where you look at what's in front of you and you're not always in the discussion, you're an observer a lot of times.
Yeah,
and you can.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Do you know Marvel Comics? But I'm going to touch because I want to connect this point.
Oh, I'm a big comics aficionado.
Okay, Utabu. Sorry, the Watcher on the Moon. Utabu. Fuck, you know what I'm talking about.
Is it a recent comic book?
Well, it's a Marvel figure. The Watchers of the universe. They're kind of. Well, anyway, I'll have to explain the narrative. I thought everyone knew the Watchers. Well, when we talk about the Watcher, we're usually referring to the one on the moon, the blue section of the moon. And that's how I think his name is Utabu. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while. I think he was replaced by Nick Fury. It doesn't really matter. The point is, his whole thing was just to watch and observe. And I would say that that's kind of my role. I don't really see. I think because most people pick sides and think, this is what I'm representing. They will say, well, you got to belong to this. So, alternatively, I will be called a MGTOW faggot by people in the alt-right, and by MGTOW, I will be called an alt-right faggot. But I'm not really on either side. Not really. I'm kind of my own side. I just kind of observe, and I try to understand other people's perspectives. To be sure, I have my own view of things, and even desires in the world, or a desire to see the world be shaped in a certain way, but I don't... those are just desires. And even I call them fancies in some ways, because I don't think they're going to be realized. But yeah, I'm not really in the business. I do try to get someone else's perspective. And I think a lot of this factionalism stands in opposition to that. So if you're the kind of person who is more of an observer and more of a person who just kind of can listen and absorb different perspectives, whether you agree with them or not, you're probably not going to have the best time in this era of hyper groupism and factionalism and the demands for orthodoxy and conformity. Like I said, it very well illustrated by this recent splintering in the skeptic community, because what I found fascinating, and I think Millennial Woes pointed this out in a video, at least it had alluded to it, is that this guy, Crowton T., who had eviscerated this girl for parting ways from the doctrines of the skeptic community, never seemed to go after people outside of the skeptic community for espousing similar views, which makes you think then, it's really about group conformity more than anything else, because she had been seen as sort of part of the herd, as it were, and now the black sheep running away from the white sheep. So I think I'm not interested in controlling anyone's thoughts or whatever, and I think that's just not. And I'm not saying that because I definitely don't think I'm special, but it's something that is not that common, because most people do want to belong to some group. But all my life I felt like I've never belonged to any group, so it's kind of it's a kind of continuity there. I'm not going to say that I haven't. I'll put it this way: when you're younger, you're more ignorant. So when I was young, I sought to belong to different groups. I tried, and I realized I never was a good fit for any of it. And then as you get older, and I'm going to be putting out a video next couple of days about Stoicism, and I'm going to be relating it to age a bit. You just come to terms with certain things. And one of those things I've come to terms with in my own case is that I don't really fit any group. I don't really fit any overarching line of thought, although I would say I'm sympathetic, say, transhumanism, but even there, not entirely. So I just I'm just me. I'm my own person, and that's something that is a fair rarity. I'm not saying that's special, but it is different.
I think, again, I keep coming back to, if you have a high degree of sense of self as an individual, as much as you can, I think you lean more towards what you're saying and stand on your own 2 feet and see MGTOW as a man going his own way, rather than the acronym, groupism that most see it as. I keep coming back to the kind of person that it works for. Yeah, of course. And a lot of this thing, like a lot of this stuff, as you say, comes with age. I tend to think that Stoicism and especially like reading the classic Stoics would probably interest. It may interest someone who's younger, but I don't think it would really internalize as much as it would with someone who's a little older. and could see practical applications of how they could actually implement that and kind of lubricate their life with these things. Similarly to MGTOW, like a lot of these things, a lot of MGTOW I see when I have discussions with people or even in the comment section, literally they just string aphorisms together, and MGTOW aphorisms together, and they call themselves, it's almost like they're playing this chess game, and every piece is a saying, a MGTOW saying, gynocentrism and, the wage gap and this and that. And I'm going, and I keep thinking, have you got any introspection to add? I'm not seeing any person who's had any introspection coming to the fore with their language through these catchphrases. All I hear is catchphrase after MGTOW catchphrase after MGTOW catchphrase, and women are bitches and all this kind of stuff. But there's no going to anywhere. There's no kind of reveal. This is what I've discovered. Here is my opinion. What do you think of this? It's all the group think. It's almost like this checklist of what the group think of men going there, MGTOW think it is. So there's less individuality or self that I see in MGTOW, which, look, I'm a lot of times when people say, I had a person recently comment, why do I still attribute the acronym to my videos? Again, it's because I refuse to sort of let go of a way I can actually reach guys that I might be able to, offer some experience or some thoughts to. And secondly, I actually like what it means to me personally, and I'm not about to let fools rip it away from me and, break the toy and chuck it in the bin because they don't care about it. I find value in what it actually stands for me personally. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is, as I said, not unique to MGTOW. This is happening across the board in many different internet groups, and even within these groups, you get the occasional stragglers or sort of individuals who aren't, all-out conformists or what have you. And the other thing is, a lot of the core things that had either been discovered or discussed or introduced in the earlier days, well, they're well known now, and so you either have to have a very tolerant personality type or mind to, post an article about some divorce case with lifetime alimony because we know that goes on, and find that interesting, or you're just you're just looking to increase your channel size or the profit margin. Here's the thing. I mean, if I actually wanted channel growth, I could just slap MGTOW on the title. I could repeat myself. I'd probably get more views. In fact, I know I would. But I just can't seem to do that. It's just not my. I don't. If I have something to say about women or female psychology, maybe I'll make a video about it. Occasionally, I will. But if I feel like I don't, well, generally, if I make a video, I feel like I have something to say on a subject matter, whether people agree or not, whether I'm actually wrong or right, I don't know. But I don't do it because I think, this is what the audience wants to hear. I will do this.
No, I'm not. I hate it when sort of art, for want of a better word, or information is written down to the audience. And I think you've done it once or twice where you've had further ideas to an old video, and now you've sort of have some fresh ideas, which is fine. But I agree with you. The kind of the very base and bland ontology of this is hypergamy, this is a divorce case. The kind of reporting of what's going on without any introspection bores me as well. So even in some of my videos where I've cited articles made, I've done it in a way where I can give my personal opinion on the article rather than just reporting on the article itself. I know some guys like that. They like that kind of reporting that they can get angry against. And so that motivates them, look at this shit. Did you see that video? Did you watch that video? Did you see what it said in the paper? And it's like, it kind of, it makes me want to either, give my thoughts on it, but not just, do a carbon copy of the news article in my own voice and that's it. It's pointless.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, YouTube is entertainment, and many of the more popular quote-unquote MGTOW channels are just a kind of entertainment. I've often likened Sandman to a kind of the radio show that you turn on your way to work. It's just a habit at some point in time. You turn it on, you listen to it. The content doesn't really matter so much as its presence, right? And I think for a lot of, it's obviously not unique to MGTOW, but for a lot of channels, that's what it is. It's kind of the thing that you're familiar with. In this case, the sort of basic MGTOW 101 stuff, no pun intended there, is just that the thing the thing you listen to. It's just something you passively listen to. And I just think that's human nature. Most humans conform to that model, I think.
I think also there's the aspect where the guys who haven't actually gone their own way to anything, when they haven't transcended to any place, it's almost like they need to hear that the loop of repetition of that basic MGTOW stuff to keep them clear, because they haven't moved anywhere. It's kind of that apathy is kind of like they forget it and then they listen to it again and it's like, now I'm fired up again. Now I know what the real truth is. And the moment I don't listen to the very base MGTOW stuff, I almost forget it. Then I believe in Nuance again. So it's almost like having to remind oneself of the truth continually because you haven't transcended and moved forward in any way.
Yeah, I think, and a lot of these guys will be there perpetually. I think age helps, but a lot of these guys will just, that's kind of their role. That's just who they are. They're going to just need that constant injection. Even the majority. If you look at the popularity of channels like MGTOW 101, Sandman, TFM, the channels that tend to just repeat the same thing over and over again, they very much cater to that kind of guy.
It's also frequency too. And they're kind of aware of the YouTube model. If you're not producing a video every day, the more you produce, the more hits you get, the more the algorithm sort of feeds users in a certain way. So all that stuff, whereas whether it's time or interest, people like you and I just don't have the time nor interest to play that game. Again, you're writing down to your audience, whether it's YouTube or your audience directly.
Yeah. I mean, it's within some sense, everyone plays the YouTube game, but I mean, as I've been accused, there are a lot better ways to run a channel than the way I run it. Put it that way. And this is just because I cannot bring myself to do certain things or to behave in a certain way. I've always been bad at that. I mean, that's kind of encapsulated in that video, The Price of a Lie. I hate bullshit. I hate the kind of fakery that seems almost endemic to human beings, the pleasantries, and I hate the formulaism that dominates social intercourse, and of course, in its own way, dominates YouTube intercourse. I just can't do it. I think that's just by nature. So it's I guess a curse because if I could, I'd probably be significantly wealthier than I am.
Look, in your case, I mean the vast volume of videos you did, say in between what was it 2011 and 13-14, which was probably core MGTOW sort of ideas and knowledge. I mean, your attenuation from that, you can actually see why. And all this kind of stuff, this person is a commercial MGTOW station. This person is more intellectual. This person, again, part of going your own way, as I see it, is you're able to cherry pick and find what works with you, whether it's works for you, whether it's entertainment or whether you can sort of get any knowledge out of it. It's fairly personal, especially when you talk about MGTOW stuff. So whenever anyone pushes you to the commercial groupthink, it really sort of it's kind of abrasive to my thinking. It really gives me the shits. It's almost toxic to the potential. I mean, I think you mentioned it before, where certain great YouTubers like, you know, CS and those guys have sort of where all the poorer for this groupthink extending to sort of that kind of toxicity where there's only one way to think, and unless you're conformist, we're going to sort of dox you and push you out. And going back to, say, you know, you can speak, you know, you're au fait with comic book lingo. You know Alan Moore, who wrote Watchmen, and he wrote V for Vendetta and all those. He's one of those kind of he's a very artistically minded, great integrity, where he wrote Watchmen under the assumption that after a year the rights would revert back to him, because all the precedent up to that point was the case. There'd never been any case where DC would actually keep the rights. Technically they could, but as a fair way of acting to sort of the writers and illustrators, they wouldn't. And because Watchmen was so hugely successful, and the only reason Alan Moore put that much work into it, because he wanted to kind of create a magnum opus of a graphic novel, and be such a great personal thing that he would get it back in a year. But it spread like a wildfire, and then basically from that point on they said, no, we're never keeping it out of print, so you're never getting the rights back. And so he basically turned his back on the comic book field, and again, we're all the poorer for it. So I don't like that that sinister aspect of whether it's internal, and I've seen people get on side with DC and say, oh well, you know, he should have known in the contract, and I'm just like, oh, go fuck yourself. You know, you don't see what's lost. You don't see in ways that we're all poorer for the fact that, you know, Big Brother and the conformist thinking actually squashed this individual and this great light. And
I can tell you, you know, through conversations I have with CS on occasion, that, you know, this is a guy who probably, you know, in a lot of ways he misses producing content, but, you know, given the fact that it was especially a witch hunt that had taken place in trying to sort of track him down and dox him, and sort of it just wasn't worth it anymore. In that sense. But rest assured, he had ideas and has ideas, and it's a shame. And I think in his case it was one of the greatest losses, because there just isn't a lot of interesting or thought-provoking content out there. Most of it's repetitious. Most of it is repetitive and just not too differentiated. And you know, he had some really great content, but it's gone now, and it's not going to be coming back, because a bunch of people in the so-called MGTOW community, I say so-called because it doesn't exist, saw fit to it that they didn't like what he had to say or whatever, and drove him away. And we are.
Yeah, it's kind of like you said, they want entertainment over information, whereas you and I would be probably entertained more with information, not just entertainment for entertainment's sake. And so these people, if you're not entertaining me in the way in which I demand, then I'm going to chuck a childish fit and either force you into it or wipe you off my slate. I don't want you intruding onto my MGTOW, you know, plate, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's a shame. It's. Yeah.
Look, I think most guys like the brochure of MGTOW, so to speak, not the actual place. If it's like a holiday or a destination. Again, at arm's length, everyone can beat their chest and act all tough. But going your own way is a very solitary thing. The benefit we have is that individual solitary men are able to congregate using the MGTOW acronym to sort of find like-minded individuals. It's not like MGTOW are going, or, you know, again, I don't want to say what is or isn't a MGTOW, but for what really the acronym actually says what it is. which is another reason I don't want to throw it away wholeheartedly. So the acronym actually suggests individuality and singularity. So it's a way of finding other individual men you can actually talk like this with, rather than just talking agreeable talking points that are part of the, MGTOW book or the axiom or the Bible. It's kind of this, MGTOW to me is like liberation and freedom and being able to sort of think independently, challenge yourself, go down paths you couldn't before, like see what you're made of, and really not caring what other people think, and being enriched through what you can actually get out of that. Whereas before, I'm pretty sure most of the guys that came to MGTOW were sick and tired of living lives for other people, living lives through this social axiom. And for the first time, MGTOW tells them that they can live their own way, go their own way, and be their own man and think for themselves. And they're all like, yeah, great. Oh, fuck, I'm scared. Let me go back and let me pretend that.
Well, I made a video years ago on the male desire for unfreedom. I think that is, here's the thing. Universe is a vast place. It's obviously, observably, pretty indifferent to our suffering, our failures, our triumphs. And then in that context, when you take away protocol and a routine and something that is very perhaps stultifying and boring and even oppressive, it sounds great to be freed from that type of lifestyle. But then when it does happen, when the portal opens and you pass through it, and then it's frightening, because there's a kind of familiar comfort in going through the routine and the repetitive nature of whatever task you've set for yourself, or rather others have set for yourself. I think that desire for unfreedom is what women absolutely, by their very nature, don't care about freedom. Men, on the other hand, are kind of torn. It's only men, I think, who have the heart and mind, as a rule, to confront the gravity of the situation of being a human being, this rather insignificant creature in this vast universe, and try to do something with it. Men are the ones who have the capacity to, if possible, some of them tell themselves lies anyway, to not tell themselves the lies and to ascribe petty importance to themselves, or even have that. Women, as a rule, can't do that. They need to tell themselves the lies. They need to conform. They need to do that. That's their nature. Women hate freedom by their nature.
Yeah. Even existentially, men have the ability. Not all men, again, but men have more the propensity to think kind of existentially outside of themselves in terms of meaning, whereas whenever women tend to do it,
solipsistic. It's always solipsistic.
Yeah, it's always almost like they're pretending, they're using the language of existentialism, but they're actually not practicing it. They have nothing. There's no introspection through that existentialism. So men will think that way, but then women, you see their memes on their Facebook walls or on their Instagram walls, where their philosophical memes or metaphysical memes are things like, everything happens for a reason. And it's always this ephemeral bullshit. Whereas guys, even when they're being existential or philosophical, tends to be grounded in whether it's stoicism, some sort of scientific, practical, rooted sort of saying or aphorism that actually uplifts or makes things clear. Whereas with women's aphorisms, and whenever they talk about sort of these philosophical and existential things, they're always just amorphous and in the air, and they sound good and they rhyme.
And they're self-referential. They're always self-referential.
Yeah, self-referential. Always. They're never devoid of the self. Like they're never kind of what's the word? I'm searching for the word where man can think abstractly. So men can think far more abstractly, which is the reason why you can get a man fulfilled by sitting in a laboratory his whole life trying to find the answer to some micro detail in some aspect of physics that no woman can understand. But he's totally engrossed in it, and it doesn't matter if he comes to a solution or an answer. He's totally engrossed in the pursuit of it, the journey, the pursuit, and the knowledge therein that he'll be enriched in as a person, and what it'll mean to him. Whereas a woman, I remember having a girlfriend where you'd watch someone climbing Mount Everest and the people that would die, and a woman's first reply is, "Oh, what an idiot! Why would you even want to do that? Why would you want to, die like that?" And it's just so hard to explain a male sense of adventure and thinking outside himself and seeing and exploration and all of those concepts outside of yourself. Women just don't sort of possess that for the most part. You'll have your odd Ayn Rands, but they're vanishingly few.
Yeah, and this is why why in my own life I don't have a lot to do with women. It's just I'm not that entertained by their looks anymore, and virtually all of them have nothing to say of any merit, I think. In very few cases they might, but it's just
most men self-censor as well. They rarely have open conversations with women. They're always this biological pull, subconsciously pulls them, where they watch every second word they say because they don't want the woman to be fading away from them. They continually have this biological want to pull the female closer to them. And so even in the language they use with a woman, they'll never be completely honest. They'll always kind of and ah and say, "Oh, not that I'm being sexist, but don't you think?" They'll never be as open as I'm speaking to you now. They'll never be completely frank, and a woman's reaction be damned. That's your opinion. What right does she have to tell you what to think and feel, or to be offended at an idea? To me, it's actually laughable, but most men just succumb to that biological pull of making women nod and keeping them happy at all costs, even to their own detriment. Like, I hate the feeling of being muffled and drowned when I'm around women, where I can't actually give my honest opinion when I'm in a conversation, like especially when, gender politics are involved and feminism and all that stuff that I'm just kind of brimming to the hilt of with knowledge of, that I censor myself and I pretend to kind of and ah about and not offend the woman, and she's just this intellectual dolt in those subjects, whereas I've got all this knowledge I can actually impart on the conversation, but I censor myself because my biology is wanting to make her happy or getting to her pants. It's really, I really can't do it. And when I see other men do it, and it's happened a few times where I'm in this conversation, I actually find another reason I talk, I suppose, about women so often in my videos is because I know, especially for other guys, as it was with me, they are the last really big umbilical cord to actually going your own way. And the things I've learned, I want to impart on my videos. And you get people saying, "Oh, well, you're still, some woman just hurt you, and you're too passionate in your videos, so it shows that you haven't actually let go. You're just waiting for the right one." And it's not that. It's that I take myself back to the lessons I've learned, and I'm talking to a younger version of myself when I talk to guys in these videos, and I actually get a really good feedback from younger versions of myself from men in conversations, which is exactly what I want to do. So it's and I've had it in the past where I've been out with friends and these topics come about men and women, and and it's always really about the struggle between being your own person, your own man, which is something women find attractive in the first place, and you allow that to die. And whenever you get onto these topics about, retaining the self and not letting yourself die and not letting your creativity die and not allowing a woman to have any say in what you think or do if it has nothing to do with her whatsoever. I noticed that men in the group, all of a sudden they go quiet and zip their mouths, and even more obnoxiously they'll turn to me and say, "Oh, well, human, you're on your own here, mate." And it's like, oh, fuck you. Like, how much of a spineless twit are you that you can't even actually stand up for an idea that you believe in? And so I think it's one of the most important topics because it's the underlying spine of a lot of men. And until you can cut that umbilical cord and stand on your own 2 feet and not really care about what anyone else thinks of your opinions, like they're just ideas and opinions.
Yeah.
I think that's a big barrier to people, whether or not you, Stardust, the degree to which you think true individuation or individuality is possible. I think it's really curtailed to that degree, you know. And in terms of MGTOW as well, a lot of these guys that I really think they don't realize that MGTOW is more a fetish to them than an actual internalized liberation that they can't wait to foster in their lives and, you know, hit the ground running with and test and, you know, finally be able to have the permission to kind of live that way in public and test certain ways of speaking and not caring. Going back to sort of comic books, everyone knows Robert Crumb. He was kind of like the grandfather of underground cartoonists. I remember watching a documentary where, I mean, he drew a lot of sexually explicit comic books, and a lot of them were fetishistically based and fairly sexually explicit. And one of his publishers had this great idea of, you know, I'm going to, at one of his events and book signings, I'm going to invite these girls that he kind of draws, and he's going to get his rocks off and he's going to really thank me. And they brought all these women in, exactly the kind of really curvy, big-assed women that he draws, and he was just standing there and he was really uncomfortable and he didn't want to interact. And I kind of see that with a lot of MGTOW. They love the fetishistic fantasy idea of whatever they believe in MGTOW, and it's a fantasy almost sexually, and then if you put it in front of them, they don't know what to do, and it's really only meant to be a fantasy, and they're not really believing it as a real-life philosophy that they can actually take and internalize.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back to what we've been discussing, namely that for many men, perhaps even most men, it's just, I guess there's a phrase, it's just a theory. And, you know, you don't want to actually apply the theory. You want to appreciate the theory. You want to the potentiality, well, the potential applications of the theory might be interesting, but actually going as far as to live those applications is a bit much. I think, you know, but then I don't actually see that as a problem. I mean, it's just the way things are.
But would you call yourself in terms of your last video, in terms of individuation and people seeking out groups without knowing it, would you call yourself an individual?
Well,
as in say more an individual than most, in terms of, I'm not saying an absolute black and white as opposed to the rest, but more an individual thinker, being able to process thoughts and come up with your own ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, throughout my life, I've never felt like I belonged to any specific group, whether that's ethnically or socially or even in terms of thought. So yeah, I think I've always had that natural inclination to not. Well, it's not even an inclination. It's just I just don't really belong, and I've made my peace with that. But you know, on the other hand,
you've got a more of a scientific mind, which is always open to revision, and it's kind of open to new information, and there's no harm in playing devil's advocate with theories and ideas.
It's kind of, as you point out earlier, you know, you're gay or not. I'm not really a group person. I never have been. Why that's the case? Well, who knows? It's ultimately a cause and effect of the atoms in my body and the universe at large. But Yeah, I've never. It's just not my nature to really be too obsessed with groups or group belonging. And this also allows me to have conversations with people from groups who feel that they belong to a group. But at the same time, I recognize that most people aren't like that, and so I can understand in MGTOW and elsewhere why people would feel the need to belong to a group. Just like I can understand, although I have no fascination for automobiles myself, why Coltrane would spend inordinate amounts of time working on a car. Or I hate cooking, but then again, I understand why Coltrane wastes hours slaving away in the kitchen. It doesn't interest me. These kinds of things. I mean, I do make an effort to understand the other's perspective, if only because I would regard, in many cases, that the other person's perspective is going to be at least a more majority perspective than mine. And so it would behoove me and benefit me to understand that perspective, because I'm going to be in the minority there with regards to my views on certain things. And they are, well, they're not. They're going to be part of some, for example, Coltrane likes motorcycles and has like a motorcycle club or something. I mean, I would never do anything like that. But I understand, because Coltrane is more social than I am. He's more, well, frankly speaking, he's more normal than I am in many ways. So, I mean, I understand these things, and I make an effort to understand it, even though I myself cannot relate to it on a personal level, and it wouldn't really stir me or motivate me. So, yeah.
Well, cars and especially motorcycles just point to freedom. That's really what.
I don't deny that, but for me, freedom is being left alone and not hearing the blathering and the nattering of people in the background. I mean, I don't need to be on a motorcycle for that, but yeah, I get it. So I understand, for example, Coltrane's perspective on food, that it's this delicious creation, but food just annoys me. I hate food. I hate the fact that I have to consume it, and I hate the fact that I have to shit it out. It's just an annoyance to me. But I understand that other alternative perspective. It's kind of...
You'd actually be a pretty good bodybuilder if you had the inclination, because most of them who...
inclination, I used to have it, but I have terrible genetics for it, so it was kind of a pointless endeavor. That's the thing.
Because you'd probably have no problem with the deferral of gratification and being able to stick to
when I was younger, I definitely didn't have a problem with that. I think I just care less and less about, looking amazing in my old age. But I mean, I did spend a lot of time with weights in my younger years, and I don't have good genetics, so that was, I think, just kind of for me a demotivating factor. Why work hard at something when when other people with more natural gifts? I wouldn't advocate expending excessive amounts of time. Let's just use some particular benefit you see for yourself in endeavors where you have no natural aptitude. I think it's kind of a waste. But yeah, I mean, it's less to do with deferred gratifications. I'm not a fan of the human condition in general. I think food is this kind of annoying thing. That you have to eat it and you have to shit it out, and it all takes time. I'm just not interested in it, but I'm forced to be interested in it because of the physiological needs of my body. It just irritates me, and I understand Coltrane's perspective. I think he understands mine, although he doesn't obviously have any consensus with that.
See, I kind of I differ in that respect, where unless something irrecoverably sort of tells me I can't, I'm fairly defiant, which is probably my part of the sort of mental makeup which makes certain aspects of MGTOW easier for me, where if someone tells me I can't do something and I really want to, nothing will stop me until something unequivocally sort of stops me, like my body breaks down or there's a wall I can't just climb over. But just information won't stop me. I'm too curious to find out myself if it's true. So things like again, your reasons for not having an interest in sort of bodybuilding or fitness. Mine's more fitness, more so than it used to be bodybuilding when I was younger. But mine's more for being as sharp as I can physically, not just mentally. And especially when as I've gotten older, I've seen family members deteriorate. And as a guy going his own way with no one to count on but myself, I am really conscious, not in a frightful way, because I don't think I'm afraid of death like most pedestrians. I think it's more a being a good custodian of the body I've got and being as sharp mentally and physically as I can, because I sleep better, my mental acuity is better, the healthier I am, the stronger I am. Yeah, sure, my ego.
That's interesting. When I used to lift weights regularly, I slept more poorly than I do when I don't.
Really?
Probably, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Would that have had other factors involved? Because I remember in your previous videos you talked about, say, your lifestyle, the jobs you had, and until you changed a few things, it was only then that your sleeping improved.
Yeah, but I mean, I think in general, through experimentation, I generally do sleep more poorly. It's kind of, to the extent that I, in my more ancient years, decided to attend the gym regularly. It's just this vague sense of obligation. It's not something I ever really look forward to. So maybe that's part of it as well. It's like, oh God, tomorrow I gotta go to the gym. It's like a job. Oh, I finally got it done. Thank the gods. And I come home and I say, oh, I can go a day without doing it. There's no enjoyment in it whatsoever, and I wish I could derive enjoyment from it. But it's just yeah. I mean, there's a lot to be said for doing things because they're quote unquote good for you, just for the sake of doing them. But yeah, I to the extent that I still engage in that, it's never something that I.
But again, it's also your perception of how you go about doing them. It's kind of going your own way. I know in my case, when it comes to the gym as well, I can't be bothered motivating myself for 2 or 3 weekly gym sessions that go for an hour or an hour and a half. As I've gotten older and knowing that I don't want to get injured, I want to continue being healthy, and all the benefits it gives me, I've structured workouts where I, instead of working 3 days a week, I work out almost every day, but for only between 10 minutes to half an hour. And I have the equipment at home, so there's no excuse. There's no talking yourself out of it. There's no being lazy.
For you, not being a transient, but yeah.
But all that stuff. I'm a big believer in sort of creating sort of. I won't let the drudgery of like motivating myself. I know I like working out or being healthy in certain ways, or going for a walk or going for a run, and I refuse to let things intrude that will take it away from me if I don't actually, if I haven't had enough of my own free will of doing it. So I'm trying to curb injuries as much as possible, because I still get a hell of a lot out of working out. And it's the same as the MGTOW stuff. Like, I'm not going to let other things, external things, take away my meaning and my enjoyment of what I find the root of the thing to be.
I think with working out, in my case, we've talked about this, I think, privately, that the root motivation in earlier days was clearly reproductive, and you took that away from me, and all I was left with was routine. I realized retrospectively that I never really enjoyed it. I mean, sure, there were some benefits to it, but, how much? I had poor genetics for the task, never was particularly strong or muscular. Or exceptionally lean for that matter, although I have gotten relatively lean on various occasions. But, so I acquired a huge amount of knowledge. I know a lot about physiology and what have you. But the activity itself, I mean, I'd be all for a pill that I just swallow that sort of forces me to do it, because I know it's good for me. I mean, I know that, maintaining, exercising and on a regular, I know all that's good, but, yeah, I mean, it's clear to me that where it was coming from. It wasn't because I enjoyed it. Even when I did it religiously, it was one of those things that I was always glad when it was done. Kind of like finishing the workday. thank the gods I'm leaving the office. I didn't want to be around these monkeys at the gym. I didn't like the people. Surely, I suppose
that's the social environment. I'm talking about the actual the solitary sort of thing you get out of.
Yeah, there's that too. And I think if I had my own house like you do and my own equipment, yeah, I probably would just do it because it's a lot easier, and I wouldn't have to, like I said, deal with these with the people around me. But I mean, you combine all of that, then a minor commute, and it just that kind of goes out the window. But I mean, this is a very sort of niche-y thing, I suppose. It's not really.
Okay, here's a question similar to the one I opened with about sort of how a lot of men think that if they were given sex robots or whatever, all their problems would be solved. But in fact, they just like the carrot of it. If you were endowed with genetics, do you think you would have pursued or sort of made it part of your life more if that was actually given to you?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I've seen throughout the years that what's most beneficial is to engage in activities that you have some aptitude for. Now, if I were a different person, people think I'm being facetious when I say, well, I'm not that smart. Well, I'm not. If I were truly intelligent, I wouldn't be on YouTube. I'd be doing something, vastly more important. Likewise, if I had good physical genetics, I would be more interested in trying to optimize that than being endowed with average or very below average genetics in that particular area. So I think, my approach is sort of just fairly rational conclusions about the limits of my own individual aptitude in certain areas versus others. And certainly if I were, one of these, 1 in 1,000, 100,000 guys, yeah, this is great, because you can see that these are the types of guys that feel more motivated. Certainly in age, yeah, it would decline a bit, but the motivation would be stronger without a doubt.
Yeah, it's funny, the reproductive drive. I've never had any desire to have children. Always been deterred.
Well,
although the drive,
distally speaking, it is a reproductive drive. The desire to look good, to be fit.
Yeah. Proximally, no, never had that desire. But it's interesting you say that because there's a lot of people with talent that do absolutely nothing with it. I mean, there's people with. I even see the way they write in comment sections, and they just don't have the motivation to even start a YouTube channel, start a blog. Not that they should, but a lot of people have natural talent that they do nothing with. So it's just a curious question I ask some people who, if you did have everything you think, like the sex robot question, if you had everything you say you'd need, and then you'd effectively win the lottery, would you in fact?
It is difficult, without a doubt. The question is difficult because you were talking about hypotheticals, and then if you were to have X, what we do. I like to think, I don't play the lottery, but let's say I won the lottery and I were worth millions. Not much about my lifestyle would change. Now, I'd probably buy a small property so I wouldn't have to worry about rent and dealing with landlords and such. But I don't really think things would change to a great degree. But maybe I'm wrong about that. So we're just speculating about things that just aren't the case, because I'm kind of stuck with the way I am, but I'm fairly certain that yes, in this particular case, I would have always been more invested in that question, because then there's a sort of panoply of other genetic attributes that go along with it. If I were the kind of person who was physically well endowed with just sort of athletic aptitude, I certainly would have come into weightlifting far earlier than I had. I think I started, I was 25, 26 at the time, because it just would have been my natural inclination. I would have played sports rather than being the guy assigned to left field in baseball and sitting on the bench in basketball. So it's a kind of, it's obvious that I was not meant to be an athlete. The gods never endowed me with these attributes. But I think, had I been that person, then they're going back through a sort of a causal chain. I mean, inevitably I would have been led down there. I probably would have stuck with it a lot better, and I would have engaged in a lot of different activities. On the other hand, it's very rare to have the combination of interest, sort of intellectual interest I have. It does happen, along with sort of athletic aptitude. So I think in many cases it's a sort of one or the other. I probably wouldn't have ended up studying ancient Greek and Latin literature had I been that person, because I would have been much more of a jock, and I dare say I would have been less intelligent in many ways. So it's kind of it's give or take. You notice oftentimes at the gym, it's usually the not so bright guys who are the big guys who are strong. I mean, this is natural selection. It's exceptionally rare that you find the guys who have natural athletic ability coupled with high IQ. I mean, certainly they exist. They would have to on a continuum, but they are the exceptions rather than the rule, I think.
I actually found that point kind of interesting because a lot of the more notable high IQ individuals around the world tended to go through a phase of bodybuilding in their youth.
Yeah, but the question is, do they have an aptitude for it? Do they have, long muscle bellies, naturally high serum levels of testosterone?
Oh, yeah.
An interest is one thing. I had an interest too. But the question is, did it become, the thing that motivated them? Just like a jock, who plays football or some other sport, might contemplate attending, college level MBA or whatever. I think there's a decision to be made there. And the people who have the requisite intellect to pursue something like high finance or science or whatever will tend to go in that direction. And maybe even if they have the genetic aptitude physically for things like weightlifting or what have you, sport, they'll do that, but it'll be more of a side project. Whereas the people who just were only the jocks will pursue that because that's their strength. People pursue their strengths, and I think I'm all for that. I mean, there's an idea that one should waste a lot of time, or I wouldn't say waste, spend a lot of time doing things that one doesn't have natural inclinations to. And I suppose you can learn something that way. You don't want to be completely ignorant of, astronomy, but you don't necessarily have to be an astronomist if you don't have the aptitude for it. And I think that's true of a number of things. And I think people should play on their strengths. That's my view. But then it's undeniable that from a health perspective, preventing muscular atrophy and a number of other things, some basic resistance training is a good thing. But it's just I just think that people naturally pursue what they have aptitude for, and I do not see too much overlap.
I guess
there.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just kind of think that I'm probably more selfish in that regard, where the people who have natural aptitudes are probably able to give the world something because they can excel in that. Yeah. Whereas to me, I really, if I have an interest, I don't care what anyone thinks.
No,
whether that's
it's
good
not
or
about
bad
what people think. I mean, maybe it is for some people. It's not for me. It's just that, I'm a kind of uniquely untalented individual in many ways, and so I'm kind of stuck in a limbo of not really being very good at anything. So I will pursue things that interest me, but I never maintain the illusion that I'm particularly adept at it. Whereas I think if you have a natural inclination, irrespective of the end products, whether you're trying to impress people or not, people just kind of do things. They just kind of jump into it. I think that something like that would have overtaken me at some point in time in my life, to the point where it would have become a lifetime passion. But me being uniquely untalented in most ways, never really found my quote unquote calling. Because after all, what is a calling but that which you have a natural aptitude for and the inclination at the same time to pursue it?
Sure. I mean, but there's also the case to be made where, as you mentioned, you just kind of jump into it, and only after having the courage to jump into something, you actually find out that it is you, that you have an aptitude. I know that prior to myself starting to produce videos, I was quite content, and I was always on the fence, and I didn't think I'd have much to offer, and I thought, fuck it. Someone else nudged me to do it, and people appreciate the stuff I do in some way, but I kind of had that fuck it mentality where I did just sort of go, let me try it out, let me see If I have anything to contribute, let me see if I'm any good. And I actually love the process of doing it. And I have a few things to talk about. And whether or not, it's universally loved, matters not to me as much as my personal satisfaction and what I get out of it.
Yeah, but I think I don't know if you're assigning me to, putting me in a category where I would pursue something to gain universal love. That wouldn't be the case. I think
No, not at all. No.
The point I'm trying to make is that if you have a natural aptitude for something and you do well in it, that itself becomes a motivating factor because you can see gains, you can see progress. And the curiosity that comes along with that is accompanied by progression and moving forward. I think that's very true of bodybuilding.
I get what you're saying.
And weightlifting in particular. When you get someone with average or below average genetics, the gains are much slower and take longer, and you're just never going to get very far in general, comparatively speaking. But even intellectually, you could, people are made by their origins over which they have no control. So, you take a Tesla. He was just, he was a Tesla. His aptitude and his inclinations and his curiosity all came together. He didn't do it to impress people, obviously, because he was very much a shut-in in a lot of ways. But I think if I had some outstanding talent, then this is just something I would have relentlessly pursued. But as someone bereft of such talents, someone who is a kind of, not even a jack of all trades, just a very average person, I just never.
I think you're a bit too humble, Stardust.
Well, I know of minds far greater than mine, and so I always put my own in that context. Suffice to say, it'd be nice. It would have been nice, rather. It should have been nice if I had discovered. So, for example, my father, who had been an architect when he retired years ago, he's quite old now. He had engaged in art, and I suppose, I'm not going to deny, I had received some modicum of artistic talent, not a lot. And he, through vicarious living, because he had gone into architecture, but had done so for pragmatic reasons as opposed to fine art, which even in those days was not exactly, you weren't get the payout for that. So he said, well, he relentlessly pushed me in that direction when I was young. When you're young, you're impressionable, you do things. And I'll never forget various episodes. I was okay, and I worked hard, and I became okay at it, pretty good, above average, because I had some modicum. But then there were people who just had none of the training, none of the rigor that had been sort of invested in me, and then I had invested in turn, completely outstripping me. And that's fine. But I just saw it as a kind of artificial thing. I mean, my father is kind of old school. He had this whole motto of, 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. Yes, you need to work hard, but all the work will be for naught the moment you encounter that person who's better. And there's nothing wrong with other people being better. That's just the nature of life. But I realized that if I were to pursue art, then it would more likely be the art of words. I would say if I'm anything, I wouldn't call myself this, I would fall more on the side of the wordsmith than of the pictorial artist, though I had attempted that, but I saw people just being much better at it. And I think you go through life trying out many different things, as I have, and you kind of realize your lot. I have no illusions about my averageness in most regards. But even so, I would say I have above average verbal capacity, but even that is not exceptional enough that it could lead me anywhere where I would do amazing things with it. So, I think I've made my peace with that. I don't, what can you do other than that? It's like, well, actually, I talk about this in my forthcoming video on Stoicism, but, there's no, it's an exercise in impotence to rage at the storm. Because you're going to be swept away anyway, aren't you? So,
and also it comes into what you get out of it and what your what you're measuring as well. Like, again, I come back to, I enjoy doing the thing for the thing itself and what I get out of it. Whether or not I'm good, I mean, all of the various kind of things that I know I'm good at or I'm above average at, like especially my artistic ability, it was practice, sure, but a lot of it was just jumping in and giving myself permission to enjoy it. And again, yeah, if after a short amount of time I found out it wasn't for me, or if I didn't get anything out of it, then I probably would have let it go, like many things that were fads in my life growing up. But I kind of just like enjoying doing stuff, and through that I kind of find out who I am and who I'm not, what I like. And a lot of, artistic ability is a perfect thing, where that's something that you either find a seed in actually enjoying, and then you cultivate it, and you only get good by the amount you sort of enjoy practicing it. It's artistic ability isn't something that's bestowed on somebody. The case to be made for sort of genetics.
I disagree with that, but I mean, it's obviously a genetic faculty. I mean, the ability, it has to do with motor control and all these other factors. Some people have it, some people don't. Just like some people are fast and other people are not fast, I would argue.
Sure, I'd say they'd factor into it for sure. But I'm saying it's kind of that perspiration. What was that? What was that saying?
99%. My father's old saying: 99% perspiration,
like
1% inspiration. Yeah.
Whether or not that's true scientifically, I think that the perspiration, without the perspiration, like I said, there's people with innate talent, and they've got something in their DNA that makes their hand-eye coordination a lot more fluid and a lot more easier. It's less abrasive for them to go from A, learning, to B, becoming proficient to a certain level than it would be for another person, just because of that wiring and whatever's in their DNA. But the perspiration goes a long way in getting there in the end anyway. It's like I see it as a running race where someone can run fast, but it matters whether or not you want to be fast or you want to reach a finish line or a goal. So there's all those factors too.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with you. It's a matter of perspective.
Well, I mean, even personality traits are largely heritable too. So, I mean, there's that. I mean, the best combination, of course, is, working, wanting to perspire and having the aptitude for it. But I mean, look, I do plenty of things I enjoy that I'm not the best at anything. There is that, but it's, I think that generally speaking, when we talk about motivation, most people like to be good at things and want to pursue something that they're good at. I have some odd talents. I was able, for example, I was doing an online game with a friend of mine. I was able to not only pinpoint a Welsh accent, but the exact region the guy was from. Not many people can do that. He was very impressed, but I mean, then $1.50 will get Subway. All these days it's closer to $3 in New York City. It doesn't really do much for me. So I mean, I think this is a fundamental difference, perhaps, in our own personality traits. That I'm kind of, I guess, maybe more resigned to my fate than you would view yourself to be. I'm not really sure.
I think
even I don't know, but I just look at it and think, well, okay, there's that and there's that.
No, I wouldn't call you defeatist. I'd say you're very practically inclined. I'd say I'm I've always been fairly rebellious and a high degree of alacrity in my persona, where I'm very eager, and no one can tell me no unless I actually find out for myself. So growing up, my parents, they tell you, don't do this, don't do that, don't stay up late before this, don't go out with this kind of woman. And, what does huMAN do? huMAN goes out with exactly that kind of woman because I need to know for myself. So the knowing, and it's part of the series I'm doing about MGTOW epistemologies, the knowing of what MGTOW means to you is, I suppose, an extension of always wanting to know for myself. That's actually my truth. that kind of individually knowing for myself what makes sense to me, that helps me sleep at night. That helps me know what is what in my world, not just some. I like facts, figures, and science as a grounding of my personal pyramid, but it's never at the top of my pyramid. It's kind of the foundations. My perception of things always directs, my view of the world, and how I see things, and my eagerness and my optimism. It's not even optimism. I don't believe in motivation. I really believe it's something in your character that you can kind of foster and nourish, and sort of, it's kind of a standing up for yourself and your principles, and it kind of aligns with truth and honesty and integrity and all that kind of good stuff. So I've got that rebellious streak in me, but certainly a lot of
that is a personality trait which is largely heritable and thus unique to you as a particular person.
Although my artistic bent, I can't actually. I've tried to find any person in my family, and talking to my parents, no one was artistically as inclined.
Not at all.
Not that I've been able. Somebody scribbled with crayon when they were in school, but no one had the combination of single-mindedness, like you pry it from my cold dead fingers. Aspect to their personality as I do, where
people are individuals at the end of the day, so you have your own traits without a doubt.
So you do believe in some semblance of individuation?
Well, of course. I mean, look. I mean, you're only roughly 50% of the DNA of your parents. I mean, you're your own person. In terms of personality, I'm vastly different from my parents, and I'm in many other ways just quite different. So absolutely, you're going to have your unique traits. I am, of all the people I know, uniquely blunt and quote unquote abrasive, but so I don't think where exactly your artistic talent came from. Look, if we were somehow 100 years in the future, we could probably isolate all the alleles responsible for every talent and inclination you have, but we're not there yet. So I think it's a matter of time more than anything else.
I often wonder, when in terms of being a large part of your personality being formed from your parents, especially when you were young. I often wonder, of the children that were either disciplined strictly by a parent, and you can either go one of two ways, you can either submit or you can rebel. I always wonder what degree that played in shaping their sense of self-esteem and independence as a person later on, or whether they continue that aspect to their lives later on. And I think of whether it's MGTOW men, the ones that are conformists, or the ones that are more individually based. Are the individual based?
My parents are huge conformists. In fact, I would argue, particularly my father, that he engaged in the illusory and false notion of kind of overhyping my abilities. I mean, typical of parents, it's your DNA, so you say, as if my art were fantastic. It was not fantastic. It was slightly above average. That was about it. I might, and in subsequent years too, I do X, and it's fantastic. That is understandable given the fact that he is my progenitor, but that is not a view that is detached from reality and objective. And so, if anything, all my life, when I was young in particular, I had to struggle against the false accolades ascribed to me as a young, very young person, and actually observe reality as it is. And that most of my life has been shaped by understanding reality in various stages, understanding what I was good at, what I wasn't, clearly recognizing people who were better at certain things than others, because that is the nature of our reality, a kind of hierarchy in which we measure ourselves against other people.
So you're saying you were aware of being unrealistically praised as a
it was obvious. I'd look at some guy, like I said, who didn't have the same training. Maybe father hadn't spent the same amount of money, And I'd look at his art and say, well, he's just better than I am. And yeah, I think, I was very aware of that. I think nowhere was I became more aware of it than, when you're young, you participate in sports, how unathletic I was. I would sit in left field most of the time. I wouldn't, I wouldn't spend time on the bench in basketball. I mean, that was kind of obvious. But then, I looked beyond that and said, well, maybe I'm not that remarkable in activity X or Y. And I'd see other people that were just, in some sense, naturally better at it. And, I don't know. It's just something that I think has always been important to me to accurately assess what my abilities are. I mean, you could make the argument that, it's impossible to perfectly accurately assess your abilities, but, the question...
You're one of the rare individuals that not only assesses reality in general for what it is, but you also have, without sort of... it's just sort of acknowledging how... the deficiencies of most people out there, that you do it to yourself as well.
Yeah, and I tell you, it's fascinating you mention this because, it comes across in all domains. So I play this game Overwatch, an online game. I'll probably do it till I drop dead. I'm one of the older people doing it, mind you. And this is a team-based game, unfortunately, I say, because it means you depend on other people to succeed. And if I make a mistake, I play a healing role most of the time, but not always, for a variety of reasons. I'll acknowledge it. I'll say, sorry for doing X. But if you want to see human ego on display, then go into competitive online gaming. And these people, it's obvious, for example, you have someone play DPS, which stands for damage per second, but basically an attack character, an offensive hero. And it's clear that they're dying a lot and they're not very efficient. You can also see in your own by the stats if you're, say, a healer, but you're getting medals and things that would traditionally be for the more offensive, but they refuse to switch off or try something different. And online gaming is a fascinating portal into looking into human ego and the inability to assess one's own weaknesses, because people they just, and I'd say with almost very few exceptions, in fact. When you see people willing to assess their own abilities, saying, look, guys, I'm really sorry, I'm not doing the job I'm supposed to, I can count them, one out of maybe 500 games. It's so rare. Because most of the time it's just, the ego is just massive. And yes, so I do think, whether that's a good or bad thing, I don't know, but I'm reasonably unique in that I'm very self-critical, and I don't, if I'm making mistakes, I will acknowledge that, and but most people, and you see this in online game, it's a perfect example. They don't have that, and it ultimately causes you to lose. And that's interesting because imagine if all these people were willing then to sort of self-correct and say, "Oh, yeah, I'm not doing a great job. Like, what can we try?" At least be open to the possibility of changing things up and doing things a different way. But the rigidity and the adherence, I'm doing this, and if things fail, it's your fault, and You can really see why society is the way it is now when you look at the microcosm of something like online gaming. Oh, absolutely. I have found this journey, which I don't really do a lot of online gaming. As a gamer, I've been more of a kind of role-playing game guy because I used to play D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, and those sorts of things. But I kind of fell into this, and I'm pretty good at what I do considering my age and my role, and I've gotten reasonably high rank. I think it's an accurate assessment, but the inability to just to reflect upon one's own mistakes, things that are obvious. For example, you don't even need to play online game. The idea in a team game of what we call 1v6ing, where you're one guy trying to take on a team of six, you will die. But this is probably one of the most endemic problems. Yet these people refuse to acknowledge that they're engaging in it, and then you waste 2 or 3 minutes and the team loses because grouping up literally is the most difficult activity in this game. Getting people to say, "Oh, no, I shouldn't do this. I need to wait." There are all these sort of instinctual, kind of twitchy things people do, in addition to the inability to acknowledge their own deficits and deficiencies, and I find that fascinating. This is particularly true of the younger the person is, the more caught up they are in their ego, and the even less ability to assess what they're strong at and what they're not. But yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. But yes, it is endemic, and I think reflective of society at large, because what is our society? It's all these days. It's just this macrocosm that's telling you how great you are and how you can do anything. And I mean, self-reflection, which used to be crucial to some degree. I mean, it's all we all acknowledge that people receive too much praise. It's, everyone gets the medal at the end of the contest these days, but it's gone into overdrive, and it's produced these people, these younger people in particular, that have absolutely zero ability to engage in self-assessment, to think critically about themselves and their relationship to other people.
Well, it's interesting you say from a young age you had it in you naturally to be suspicious of self-praise that wasn't sort of it couldn't really be rationally attributed to you, whereas these people lap it up with a spoon.
Well, of course. Why wouldn't you? It's perfectly understandable. If someone tells you you're great and you're handsome and whatever, I mean, whether it's true or not, you want to believe it as a rule. Most people would. So you're going to believe it.
I think without sort of getting cliche, I think there is some case to be made for it being a highly gynocentric system where that female mentality of, every woman is a princess, every woman is a goddess.
But it's also affected young men, because the system, as we acknowledge, the educational system is a gynocentric. And in that system, of course, you're going to have a different type of social interaction from the teacher to the student. So, yeah, I mean, it is gynocentric, but even, Timmy is great even when he's not great. And then they enter into a scene which is separate from education, like online gaming, and they're actually shit, but they can't acknowledge that. Or, they'd be better off playing a different hero, but nobody, it's interesting, though, that in the few times when I often play the role of babysitter if someone's older, these young'uns, and I'm able to sort of babysit and reorganize. I say, look, guys, this isn't working. We need to acknowledge that the enemy team's DPS or attack heroes are better than ours, so let's change something up. And then we do, and sometimes it works because we're able to coordinate and make up for the deficits. But it's only because we acknowledge certain things. I think society as a whole, humanity, would benefit from being more self-critical. I don't see a lot of this really anywhere. And if I have any strength, that probably is my greatest strength, is I can say, look, I'm not that great at X. Maybe I can improve. Maybe I can't. I don't know. But I know that I'm lacking here. There's a reason why I don't play, say, offensive heroes, because I'm a bit older. I don't really have the talent for it. So I avoid it, because I know I wouldn't contribute a whole lot. I can contribute more tanking or supporting or something like that. It's freakishly rare to encounter that, and when I do, I'm a bit stunned, because it does happen. It's just in the young people, you almost never see that, the blaming other people. This is because we live in a victim. That is also endemic on online game. The mistakes other people make, when it's clear mistakes, 1v6 is classic. Doing things as specific heroes that you just shouldn't do, like charging headlong on the enemy when no amount of healing in the world could save you because they're all focus firing you. They do it anyway, and then they blame you for not saving them. It's incredible. So that experience, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I continue playing, is just a fascinating portal into human psychology to see how people interact and what those deficiencies are. But if you look at the wider society,
I'm pretty sure there's people with lab coats taking statistics from whether it's online game, Twitter, and playing the chess game of society from up high, and it's just a gold mine for them to be able to observe people and knowing how to push buttons and direct society into the future.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the sort of feminizing of education and just, I guess, social trends in general has been negative for everybody. Well, for one thing, obviously women believe they're more capable than they are, but even, every child that grows up in society grows up with this notion that they're special. Most of us aren't special. Most of us are goddamn plain and average, if that. And I mean, there's nothing wrong in acknowledging that it is reality after all. It's like, acknowledging whether you're tall or short. You can't really run away from it. Well, you can actually with all the illusions. What do you think all these groups and factions allow you to do? To live in a kind of a fantasy world of your own creation.
You can kind of lean on everyone else.
Yeah, because everyone reinforces the dream and the illusion. Oh, you are really good. You are this. At the same time, if I will acknowledge somebody doing a good job. I see them in the game, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah, I'll acknowledge it. Say, good job. I'll vote for them at the end of the game, whatever. But, I'm someone, I'm not going to pretend just for the sake of, cohesion. But I see particularly in this generation, it's absolutely horrific.
It's funny. When I was growing up, I never got any praise for my endeavors, artistic ability, sporting pursuits, or anything like that. But whenever I did approach my parents, if I showed them a drawing I did, they'd commend me and say, "Oh, that's good," or "That's nice." It was a fairly pat, standard kind of acknowledgement, but never overpraising me, never telling me I was special. And I remember when my parents would come, there'd always be one of them at a basketball game growing up. And if I played badly, you'd come off and my mum would say, "You played shit. You played awful." There was never any fluffing up. Or when I did play well, she goes, "Oh, you played really good. That was good." And so there was always a sense of reality. And when I drew, I never got praised, and I always wanted to do it and get better because of my own desire to do it. And I don't know if it was it was probably a good thing, because I still enjoy doing it today. But I get so much personal fulfillment in and of the doing the thing itself. And there's actually no validation from anybody. Actually, I'm suspicious when people tell me the work is good. Objectively, I can actually observe it as an observer and say, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I like the way that turned out. But when people praise me, when people say, oh, you must be really proud, you can draw, and I kind of feel funny, because I think I'm not anyone special. What I can do, maybe, to a certain degree, when objectively put against others.
Well, what I think is interesting is that I think it was because my father's sort of vicarious desires that I would only be praised for my art unjustly. Wouldn't really be praised for anything else. He had no interest in sport per se, and other things, essay writing, where he didn't really care about that. I think it was just very much sort of a personal investment. But yeah, I think that in general, this is kind of one of the defining characteristics of the of this generation. I don't even know what it is. Ed, the newest one, just completely out of touch with reality in themselves.
It's funny, because your personality is one where, when the truth makes it evident to you, you can't deny the truth, and you'll kind of omit yourself from the situation. Whereas the generation today, no matter the reality, it's this pig-headedness and completely selfish. And I don't mind selfishness, with the caveat of never actually being selfish at anyone else's expense. So what you're talking about in video games, I detest.
Oh, well, what do you think it drives me crazy? I mean, you're stuck in a team game where one weak link in the team can ruin everything. And it's a total lottery because there are 35 million players. And so, chuck the die out, hope you get a good roll, pretty much. And
I find it interesting that you play team games when you're certainly more an individualist.
Well, I mean, there's a certain satisfaction in my own role as a support, because I'm pretty good at what I do in that respect, when everything comes together, when you have everyone is doing the things, making call-outs. The DPS is killing stuff, the tanks are tanking, I'm on point with my heals, and the end product is you win. And that's very satisfying. I actually like working in that kind of team setup, when it's very focused and directed. I suppose it's a very male thing. But obviously it's a challenge of self-improvement too. It's kind of, something enjoyable about it on some level. But then the lottery aspect is not so enjoyable. And then, dealing with the it's the inane. It isn't. It's insane. But yeah, 35 million people. You really see the kinds of deficiencies people are walking around with, and your own lack of control. I think that's another insight you gain, is that the helplessness is that, people have oftentimes coming to terms with reality. Well, in some sense, being placed into a competitive team game where you're reliant on, where one weak link essentially gets you killed. Imagine yourself on a desert isle and a 1 weak link everyone dies. That's a bit, it's obviously more dramatic and more extreme, but yeah, I mean, that's effectively what it is. And so I see that and I think, this is the world at large. We have many, many weak links. And if you want to answer, it's a kind of microcosm of why society at large is falling apart. All these people living in their own little worlds, delusional and deluding themselves about how great they are, and trying to shelter themselves from other ideas. And it's extremely hard.
Well, when it comes to video games, I just imagined the analogy of even if the world is falling apart, if they wrap it up in a beautiful video game, people don't care that Rome is burning or how they're acting.
Well, so I'll give you sorry, I interrupted. Go on.
I was just going to say, look, if we give people their bread and circuses, they don't really care how they're operating within it while they're eating and while they're having their circuses. They don't actually care about the what they're leaving behind, how they're developing themselves or not developing themselves, what they're learning, how they're growing. And in a lot of cases, especially with the educational system or anything, people aren't just staying neutral. It's not that they're not learning. They're actually regressing. They're becoming dumber and more infantile.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think you see this actually in the kinds of heroes that Blizzard, this company, releases. There are, as of this date, 4 healers and 10 offensive heroes. I mean, it just goes to show the kind of crowd they're trying to feed. Now, healers are at least played characters are viewed as boring or whatever, yet they're essential. But it just shows you the kind of crowd they're trying to placate.
And no one wants to aspire. I've noticed that, again, going back to the comic book field, back in my youth, there used to be Superman, Batman, even Wonder Woman for youth to aspire to. Now they've regressed the heroes to be Superboy, and even in the movies and comic books, it's kind of, let's write down to the audience. Let's make a mirror for young kids to look at. There's no longer a man to aspire to or a woman to aspire to with ethics.
I would argue
and
they're
morals.
not really men; these are gods, right? So the comic book characters of old were obviously not. It really depends on their individual powers, but in terms of the mythos that they represent, are in fact gods. It's kind of a level you can never really attain, but something you strive for nonetheless. So Batman is clearly a human, but he really represents the pinnacle of the human, despite his many flaws. The things he does, and Superman is on a different level entirely. But it's trying to aspire that and move up that ladder. But no, I mean, these days comic books are it's all about relatability, right?
It's there's always the hero's always angst ridden and has trouble with women. And you think someone with this much power, and when they're in the throes of, saving the world, and they're confident in their, acting out as a hero in all their athletic ability and their power, the next minute a light switch gets flicked and they're powerless to the female, this neotenous nothing who's, twirling her chewing gum out of her mouth from high school. This hero or god, as you said, is reduced to a mere human. That's the kind of aspect, that's the real schism that I've seen compared to, I mean, they're not going to really do that to Batman because Batman's really entrenched, and so is Superman to a lesser degree, but Batman is the only one I see that you better not fuck with him. He's kind of immovable in that sense. He's going to be fairly masculine. He's going to be fairly stoic. He's going to be what he is. Yeah. If anything, Batman has gone darker and more brooding and more masculine since Frank Miller in the 90s.
Oh yeah,
So,
I'd
but
agree with that. Yeah.
all the rest of them, like Spider-Man, I remember in the, was it 70s, 80s, when
Well,
a
you
couple
gotta
of
be
Spider-Man
honest
movies.
here, human. Marvel has gone down the sort of pussifying gynocentric route far more than DC has, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, female Thor, right? Jane Foster becoming female Thor, and then when she comes down with cancer, Thor,
When does she turn into the Hulk? Whenever she has her period?
No. Well, female Thor, it's just that, all of a sudden Thor becomes unworthy because he has, talk about self-doubt, doubts about his own worthiness because he believes that he is, the hammer defines him, and then there's this crisis, and so he's just sort of, not Thor the thunder god, but, Thor the warrior, the son of Odin or whatever, and somehow she becomes worthy of the hammer and blah-de-blah. And then, the transsexual black lesbian half half Latino in a wheelchair hero becomes whoever. Marvel has been a lot worse at that than DC. I'd say that DC has kind of stuck to their guns a lot more on overall, in a lot of ways, and the characters have many more defined traits, whereas Marvel is just kind of has become a sort of PC stomping ground, as sort of endlessly malleable heroes.
DC have got a lot more stable, big characters than Marvel. Marvel have got kind of a lot of middle of the road popular characters.
Well, I'd argue that the mighty Thor had been a stable character of defined characteristics and qualities, but the PC police can get their teeth into anything. And
I'm saying is that Marvel tend to be more PC and going down that road. That's their flavor. That's how they're probably differentiating themselves with DC by going the social justice. What's the word? A multicultural diversity tangent, whereas DC tends to kind of not stray too far from what has always been popular. And, they don't want to play with their formula as much as Marvel does.
Which is a good thing. I mean, if you haven't checked them out, the DC animated universe, some of those films are absolutely fantastic. I've seen them all to date. Do check them out if you can. They're just been going on for about 5 or 6 years. These about hour-length animated films, and not all of them are amazing, but they're all at least good, and some of them are excellent. Completely outstripping Marvel in this regard. And that's funny because I used to be more of a Marvel fanboy in the 80s and 90s. But in my old age, although I don't really collect comic books per se, I still follow the scene to some degree. And I have to say I've definitely swapped over to DC more because the stories tend to be better, the characters are more consistent, and Marvel is just all over the place. Very disappointing what's happened there. But I mean, this is just the trend in society at large. And the problem, I think, really is just how do we correct this? Especially, in my most recent video, YouTube itself and our media platforms are under fire. So alternative ideas and counterculture really have no way to sort of breathe and escape or won't. I don't really have a good answer to that, to be honest.
Oh, well, by dint of going your own way, it's kind of implies that you're not as solution-orientated in the broader scheme of things. More so, you're more concerned with your immediate work.
I'd agree with that, but I'm not going to lie. I have been for years disturbed by the many developments that have befallen society at large, direction things have gone in. I don't like it one bit. I can't say I have a good solution for it, one that's actionable, but I think we need those kind of countercurrents and those kind of those counter voices.
But it's kind of a hard thing. What do you do? Like you need to be living under a rock these days not to see how feminized Australia's become. And it's almost like, what can you do? I don't know if you heard the other day here in Melbourne, there's a cafe run by feminists here in Melbourne that's charging 18% surcharge for men for the gender pay gap.
And it was been debunked enough times, but Well, I
But
guess, they're going to lose business then. I mean, it's pretty simple there in that case, right?
No. They showed it on the news, and they interviewed the compliant male.
I
and
think I've
he's
seen
kind
that
of,
one, yeah. It was an older guy, if I recall.
Yeah, he knew next to nothing. He was just being agreeable because a woman was interviewing him, and the whole cafe is saturated in estrogen. So, he was just like, oh, well, yeah, I suppose it sounds right. So, I mean, what do you do when your own Prime Minister, I don't know if you heard recently that our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, he pledged $100,000 towards domestic violence for women.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to deny it, man. For everything I hear, Australia is a shithole. No offense, but it is. I've only always been interested in the fauna anyway, the marsupial life and what have you. But as far as living's concerned, it's become, well, unlivable in a lot of ways. It's worse than North America.
Where you are.
How
is it compared to where you are?
Well, I kind of live. I live apart from. I'm a bit of a hermit, and the stuff goes on. But I do think that Australia takes the cake based on what I've seen in terms of all these feminizing policies and just the direction things have gone. And I mean, I've been never had a tremendous interest in Australia to be honest, but man, even now, even less so because it just seems what is there of value there apart from the marsupial life, which interesting.
But in terms of like what you're saying, in terms of what can you do about things, when you see what are supposed to be leaders and everyone sort of sees as smarter than themselves, most people even subconsciously recognize that your leader is someone who's more in charge, more capable, more intelligent than the average pedestrian. When he himself gives $100 million to women's domestic violence shelters and he gives $2 million to men's, and when you look at what he gives men, do you know what men's is? The $2 million for men is going to be set up as a hotline for men who are about to hit their women to call up and be talked down. So everything is directed towards the female. So if they're giving primetime coverage to this cafe that still believes in the wage gap and all that kind of stuff, it's I'm kind of on your bent, where the more I kind of bunker down in my own little world and try not to interact with that side as much as possible. Although, to tell you the truth, it's in your face everywhere, at work, on the radio, the moment you go to the supermarket, talking to family members, it comes in your face, and it's sometimes very hard to speak frankly about things the truth about. But that's the real challenge where I am. But
yeah, well,
I don't know.
In my forthcoming video, which is going to have, it's going to be a bit different on Stoicism. It's kind of essay, poetic format. It's already scripted. It should be out in the next couple of days. I sort of allude to some of this, but what can you do? Not really much. I think that's another kind of honest assessment. You, huMAN, can't do very much. You lack the resources, and clearly Australia. You got to be honest about Australia. By now, I have a number of Australian friends. I've talked to them. They have different assessments, but I have an Australian friend that's lived outside the country for a while. Is going to move back, and he's dreading it. He's a child. He's going to have probably more in the future. He's not MGTOW, but even more concerned because he has a son. Australia is just a goner. Another big indicator of how bad it is, worse than North America, for example, or the UK, was the response and reception to The Red Pill, this film by Cassie J, who I believe is a Californianite, but I'm not sure. Anyway, might be American or Canadian. I think she's American, right? She is.
Yeah.
You might hear about it. Now, this film is about as innocuous as it gets. There's nothing extreme about it. It's very sort of milquetoast.
I've seen it.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen it. I've seen snippets, but I've seen the snippets, and it's about as bland as you can get. It's like, like coffee with a dab of milk. Okay. But it's the coverage of it. Insane. So,
They actually banned it without seeing it.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm referring to, in part.
Yeah.
Australia is just, no offense, it's a giant shithole. There are plenty of other reasons why it's a giant shithole, too. I mean, the housing, the housing issues in terms of overinflated prices, Chinese economic dependency. There are a lot of other reasons. But the point is, I mean, even in that just one little area, I think it's more fucked than any other place in the West. I mean, even though you're technically in Oceania, but I mean, there's just nothing. There's nothing I find apart from, like I said, the interesting marsupial life. I just can't see a single redeeming feature. Because you think North America is bad, but seriously, it's just you hear the stories, you see the stories. I heard about the cafe in Melbourne, which is just this sort of, I mean, no offense, but Melbourne just seems like a total shithole, like hipsterville. Everyone drinking their weird lattes out of fucking avocado peels and shit.
Well, it's the most multicultural city in Australia. Australia's already one of the most feminized countries, but the city of Melbourne and Victoria, where I live, is the most multicultural by far, and so the amount of feminization should actually tell you the correlation between all the leftist thinking and.
Yeah, I've heard. I have a friend who was born in Melbourne who wants nothing to do with it now. Granted, he's more on the reactionary, right-leaning side, but understandably, it's just it doesn't. But yeah, it just sounds awful. But even even I know other people from the Sydney area. It's just. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what is desirable in Australia. No offense, but it's just. Things are so far gone there.
The quality of living. You've got a lot of freedoms, but the intellectual, political kind of voice and the what the social voice and the direction and the axiom is completely shit. But underneath it, you're allowed a lot of autonomy despite it. So I think my frustration is the inability to live as authentically as the culture purports you can. Right. That kind of stuff. So it's this kind of.
I mean, it's one thing to say, we got the pawns on the Barbie, guys. Let's put those kangaroo baggers on the Barbie, okay? But I mean.
Well, that's the attitude of Australia, which is probably led a long way to the apathy and letting sort of the gynocentric sort of thing take over. Is let them, don't worry about them.
I mean, and here's the thing. I mean, I'm the first one to argue that there's no such thing as American culture. That it's just consumerism. But talk about a place wholly without culture, and that's Australia. It's just
that's why they try to convince you of diversity and multiculturalism. It just sort of makes the cultural country, if it had any culture, it makes it completely bereft. After a while.
I mean, it did have some kind of culture, but it was very weak, and I think this is true of all the former colonies, or penal or otherwise.
It was emerging, and then it got sort of suffocated very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the first one, like I said, to criticize the United States on this. This sort of. I normally play on European servers when I do my online game, but I was because the ping issues, it's better connectivity. But I was playing with an American friend on his account, one of his alternate accounts, and I was joking. I wasn't really taking the game seriously because I'm actually on gaming holiday at the moment because I'm a bit burnt out. I said, just messing around. I said, you guys have a lot of strip malls where you are? Because he had shown me this photograph. He was complaining to me one day. He said, look, you got to look at this. And they had in his state, they had deforested an entire area with perfectly well-functioning, pleasant trees to install a strip mall. But there are already 3 or 4 strip malls within within 10 kilometers or so. But I see Australia as kind of almost being worse off because you're even younger, you're more far removed. You're also isolated geographically in a way from. So you kind of do your own thing, and it's
maybe that's why the way Australia has kind of turned out recently has a lot to do with its isolation.
I think so because look, it's always a question of degree of isolation. As much as the English, say they're not European or whatever, I mean they've been stuck next to the rest of us for a long time, and North America is far, but not that far away, and there's Canada and Mexico. And but you're a giant island, and you kind of you do what you want, and so you can take kind of strange turns in driving, as it were, that other places don't, because there's no feedback really, at least immediate feedback. You're kind of just doing your own thing. You have all the comforts you want because you can, put your phones on the barbie and all that.
Yeah.
But
I've actually noticed when I think about it, how we talk about it, Australia was kind of emerging and forming its own culture decades ago, but it's almost like when I think about it that the only thing remaining as a constant is more or less, I know there's degrees, but more or less men have stayed being the, she'll be right, Paul Hogan, very relaxed kind of guy. And there's a lot of tradies and that kind of alpha male primitive. It tends to be lauded as something to aspire to and that women like. But it's almost like what replaced it was all the female, the gynocentrism is all, you feel like you're talking and listening to American women. They just got Australian accents now.
Which is, so, I'd argue, even less pleasant to listen to. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, but
I am not a fan.
Yeah, well, apologies for having to listen to this.
That's not a problem.
But yeah, it's almost like the men I haven't seen much of a change other than men becoming more and more sort of neutered. But women, it's almost like the women have been replaced by the American female, albeit with an Australian accent.
Oh yeah, I hear stories. Yeah, I mean, it's
all the platitudes that come out of their mouth are American women's ones. They're all
well. I mean, it's not. It shouldn't be shocking because women are women. They're the Borg consensus. I mean, you can put a different accent on them, a different language, but they're all going to say the same thing, pretty much. So I think don't know why that should surprise, really.
In terms of the Borg consensus, I actually thought a good analogy was that kind of groupthink of MGTOW was similar. Like you've got the Borg MGTOW and then you've got the more individually inclined.
Well, women are naturally more Borg than men are, and there's less tolerance of dissent. I mean, hence, these kind of these gossip trails of women, sort of dissenting from. I mean, as much as I have no interest in Lacey Green, but she quote unquote dissented and got shit for it and things of that nature.
I think women's Borg mentality comes out when they feel themselves about to be ostracized and be on their own. They fight for, the womanhood and the Borg consensus. But when they're in safety, they don't give a shit about women. They fight each other. They don't give a shit about female kind. It's all for, dog eat dog. They do not care about womanhood. But as soon as they're going to be cast on their own as an individual, almost going to be made into a man,
that's very predictable.
Into an environment that's very male, like an isolated environment, they can't stand it. So then all of a sudden they get on their pulpit. And
that's how they operate. The Borg consensus is only operative when there's a kind of what's seen as sort of a larger, overwhelming threat to womankind. But on the individual basis, they're harpies. Women. What's the joke? Women don't have friends; they have frenemies. So that's just the way they are. But I don't envy you for a variety of reasons in Australia. It's just they're and that's just all the feminizing stuff. And never mind the property market and all this other crap that's going down there. It's not looking good there.
Not only do we have the most poisonous concentration of animals in the world, we also have the most poisonous women.
Yeah, well, man, is that a coincidence? My usual people. I'm always yanking every Australian on YouTube. That's typically, do you fear funnel webs and brown snakes? What are you on about, mate?
Well, I wonder if there's going to be a peculiar inversion where the most the biggest MGTOW will come out of Australia because of pure necessity, because we've got so many poisonous females and animals that men will really need to be seeing what they're made of in reaction to this. So in some ways, Australia with our weird accents might actually be the charge out of this bullshit, although I don't really care in my lifetime.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna take a while for shit to truly hit the fan. I think really what you're gonna see, the next generation, like my friend's son generation, so the next 15, 20 years, that's really where you're gonna see the after effects of of all of this, if we're still around, it's gonna be pretty awful, worse than it is now. It's just, but what do you do in light of all that? And I think I don't discuss formally these points because it's a fairly brief essay, but my forthcoming video on Stoicism, I talk, you have to just take it in stride. I don't know what other option is there.
Part of me, not that I like it, but there's something to be said for the opposition and knowing who you are in opposition. I think it was who was it? John Henry Newman said through opposition, intellect and strength grows. And it's not that I want to have feminists around me, but I'm not sure whether I would know myself as fervently as I do or want to if I didn't have the opposition. So,
you learn a lot. Well. You learn about what, because something just is sort of wrong. See, I remember even, this is how my own sort of red pilling in the mid 2000s, always, being purple pill effectively for a long time. And I've recounted this story many times on my channel, so I'll apologize to listeners, but it's this sort of, no, yet another magazine article saying that men are shit, or it's almost very strange. Why all these fingers pointed at men? And then it kind of hit me and crystallized the Barbarossa, and without that, you wouldn't know the enemy or the lay of the land, if you want maybe a better way of putting it. But I don't know. I don't know the solution. You might get shit for that. I don't know this. I don't know the solution. Okay, but look, put it this: if the solution be simple. If everyone could adopt my mentality, specifically mine, women would probably start chasing after men for sex because nobody would really care anymore about women. But that's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, that's logical. But see, what you just mentioned, and you mentioned it before when we started talking. You talked about if I was in charge, and you repeated it again in terms of like if someone asked me, if more people thought like me. That's actually a sign of higher intelligence, people willing to sort of think of solutions or think abstractly outside of their immediate selves for solutions, even if it means them being in charge and instilling values and instilling a direction.
We have to be honest. I'll say it plainly here, and I've said this, that the degree of empowerment and enabling we've given to women in previous decades has been disastrous across the board. The extra oomph they've gotten in terms of support and education, the extra help they've gotten in every possible detail of life, it's been disastrous because, yes, when women engage in the Borg consensus, it is in places like Google and this idea of, we need to get more women on board. Their influence has been, I think, very clearly a net negative in the large, and so...
Oh, sure. I've always said whether it's importing immigrants or giving women concessions, what do you think will happen when you give dependent people independence? Everything goes to shit. And it doesn't matter if it's women or if it's people with low IQs. Of course, they're coming to Western countries because life is good. Why wouldn't you? Yeah. But at the expense of who and what. And that's what no one's fighting against. That's what no one's speaking up about. MGTOW is one aspect, speaking up against your own women, your own culture, with at least a modicum of intellect greater than, someone who's only got an IQ of 70. You can talk, it's like talking to a brick wall, but at least speak your mind to the women and people around you. And that's a really good start. If there's any change to be made, is just stop being afraid of speaking your own mind and your own opinion. If they start jailing people for just having a different point of view, if there's any kind of manning up, and I don't like the aspect, it's just just don't be afraid of speaking your mind about an idea. Like what's wrong with a perspective?
Yeah, I've kind of, I've moved well past that stage where I'll just sort of speak my mind on a lot of things, but Yeah,
You're a lot more respectful than even I am. I don't know why people, you know how you say some people kind of call you this and call you that. You're very respectful as far as I can see.
I'm a fan of etiquette, actually. I don't think degenerating into like, "Oh, you fucking faggot," that sort of childish commentary. I'm not a fan of that in really any context. If, for example, I'm on an online game, I'm not going to engage in the name calling either. I'll be matter of fact, say, you're not doing your job, we switch, but not, whereas I notice in my younger compatriot, he'll use the kind of, I guess, the lingo of the time, and sort of, I'm just not interested in that. And that's why when I heard this story about Kraut and T and the skeptic community, and I was never really a huge fan of, had some dealings, had him on, and the whole this defection, the kind of language he employed. I mean, I think a degree of sort of politeness and etiquette is important because it tells you a lot. When I get someone coming on my channel saying, "You're just an alt-right faggot, I don't want to, debate me," you already know the kind. When he's using that type of discourse, you know that nothing fruitful will come of it. So I think, I'm a fan of not, I wouldn't say politeness, but a basic sense of etiquette and engaging with people. Because maybe it'll lead to something more productive, and even if it doesn't, at least you don't need to be at each other's throats. If there's a problem, the problem exists unto itself. So if you're playing, say, Overwatch, and you have a shitty DPS player, it's not going to help the situation by adding whatever name to his own, or, to describe his own poor ability. He's not doing his job. That's fine. You can point that out. But the same is true, I think, of anything else. I mean, adding sort of appending extra names to people isn't going to help the situation, I think. So I just prefer to say, look, this is the situation. It's not great, and be matter of fact about it. Now, if that's polite or not? I mean, in a lot of ways, it's not polite because I still will point out deficiencies and defects, but I'm not trying to add extra material. I guess I'd say that. That's the way I put it.
Oh well, it's the only way you're going to grow and learn anything. Otherwise, it's just an echo chamber of, we're talking about these MGTOW guys that have their own rule book that no one can dissent from. How else are you going to know yourself and further yourself and grow and explore new frontiers and know things a little better if you're just talking in an echo chamber? And I was even thinking even things like this where we springboard off two people springboard off topics like the one you had about individuation, and I've touched on similar topics. The simple act of talking to a different mind on similar topics brings out conversations that I normally wouldn't have had in my own echo chamber of my own head.
Yeah.
So it helps me explore my own mental faculties and my own knowledge and my own ideas and fortify those things, as well as sort of, other people can share in those things and, they can think for themselves. But when all it is just a repetition of checkpoint MGTOW or, socially conformist points of view, you're not growing. You're not making the most of your time on this planet. You're not enjoying yourself. You're not, I don't see the point. It's just kind of masturbating over the same thing every day.
Yeah. And the thing, this is something I've seen in YouTube, which I found, I'm going to say, in recent months, very disappointing, that a huge dearth of just interesting content. It's all repetitive. It's all formulaic. It all fits a niche. I just can't find interesting stuff. That's why I lament the loss of C.S. MGTOW in the YouTube sphere, because he made interesting videos. I would learn something, at the very least superficially, and more often than not so superficially. But everything fits a category these days, and you don't conform to the formula. So, for example, in my own channel, I have to struggle. I do have to, there's some degree of conformity, because there are plenty of videos I'd love to make that I know won't get views. Put out a video a while back about sort of English in Scotland, not exactly the most popular topic, but it didn't even break 3,000 views. So, it tells you a lot, because there's no demand for it. That's the way it works. Would it do better in a place like Minds.com? I don't know. But, it's just, YouTube used to, there was back in the day, really sound like an old man, but back in the day, we're talking a couple of years ago, just how things, huMAN, how things have changed, that, back in the day used to mean 20 years ago, but in cyber reality these days, it's like 3 years ago, it used to be different. Well, it was, and there was a kind of spontaneity to YouTube and a kind of freshness. Not everything was in a neat category, provided for you, recommended. It shapes the mind. It was you could discover things, you still can, but it's just,
there was the long game was involved. Yeah. Whereas now, it's funny, you go onto YouTube and you just discover, like, say, this news article about the cafe that's charging 18%. And people on YouTube will go, oh, I know it's old news by now. It happened 3 days ago. And it's like, Jesus Christ, I haven't even had time to, script or think about it, let alone make a video and just blurt it out. So it's amazing how time's been contracted. And if it's not sort of soundbite material, like you're old if you're one day old after the fact.
Yeah. And I think that there's, some of the, I wish there were an audience for some of the topics I'm most knowledgeable about, like medieval history or whatever. There's a lot of things I could say, but it's just not, a lot of the things I talk about are not my actual background. So the things that I know, at least have the background and know quite a bit about, I refrain from speaking on, just because there's some, you want some impact. Although I do make those videos on occasion because I just feel like I got to make this video, but still.
But you don't want to be. You could get an audience, but you don't want to be writing down and calling yourself the bitches of medieval history just to get. People clicking onto your video. Great.
Women ruin the Middle Ages. But it's just one of those things, and I think so even without these curtailments that we can expect in the future, it'd be nice to have an alternative platform. People mentioned Minds.com, but what is Minds.com? I mean, it's hardly the case that the skeptic community is producing instrument material. They're just imitators and copy and pasters anyway. So it's just, there aren't that many videos that I watch these days with an interest, and I guess it's just a sign of the times.
I've noticed that Minds as well. Recently, in the last few weeks, they've introduced like a new part of Minds where you're going to pay. So it's not that it's gone the same as YouTube, but I can see it being another great outlet for the time being, an alternate place to put your videos should there be a sweeping PC change and anything with MGTOW attached to it, or it's sounding like MGTOW will be removed from YouTube, which could happen. It's good to diversify like that and keep those videos and voices alive. And I wouldn't like all the work I've put into my videos to just be flushed down the toilet. I mean, I do it for myself, but I like putting them out there so I can have conversations with people and, make connections with people like you, and then through that expound more theories and know myself more and grow my own appreciation of things. I don't want it suffocated for my own sake.
Agreed. Although I think if there's a hierarchy, the people that YouTube are going to go after, it's ironically enough, because they're not very controversial, they'll probably be the skeptics. The alt-right will get hit pretty hard. I think MGTOW is definitely there, but it might be last. But in any event, I mean, all of us, as I said, we're all part of a kind of counterculture, although I'm reluctant to include the skeptics because I don't really find them skeptical. But I mean, there's gonna have to be some thought process that goes into an alternative, because when YouTube was created, or the format, I don't think I ever envisioned it to be a kind of platform for alternative ideas. I just thought it was a funny place where people upload funny cat videos with a cat, standing on its two legs and dancing or whatever, and all that harmless crap, rather than anything else. And I know they want to sanitize it, obviously. So we need a platform of comparable size that also, that it just lets shit be uploaded, and
Well, YouTube's become the video version of Google, essentially, and it's going to be a shame if they start to curtail the accessibility of YouTube in that way. But one thing I noticed as well, when you mentioned the skeptic community, one trait if we're talking about groups, is that I see like people within communities that don't censor or question each other, but I see much more of it in MGTOW. The men in MGTOW like attack each other, dox each other, question each other, which I know is a male aspect. It's a scientific inquiring mind, but you don't see anywhere near that or any at all in other communities. Have you kind of noticed that?
Well, you see it to a degree in the alt-right. In the skeptic community, I mean, yeah, there was that sort of blow-up. But generally speaking, yeah, I mean, I think because by its nature, if you're going to go your own way, you're going to do your own thing, at least to some degree. And others are more about, I mean, the skeptic community is all about conformity and a kind of a very specific set of ideas. MGTOW doesn't really mean anything, as we've discussed. It's sort of, doing your own thing. But if you're a skeptic, then, there's a kind of almost a board-controlled set of precepts that you're going to expound upon. You're going to talk about freedom of speech and the sovereignty of the individual, and you don't want to be too far left or too far right, and it's all protocol. And so it's actually much more clear. I think one of the reasons it's very clear, say, in the skeptic community, of how you're supposed to behave, because there are a set of unwritten guidelines. You know what you're supposed to say. MGTOW can kind of go any way. I mean, obviously there are people who are very formulaic, like Sandman and MGTOW 101 and these other profound thinkers. But in the skeptic community, it's just very clear. You're going to toe the line. SJWs are bad and this is stupid, but that's too extreme, so we won't say that. But that's not extreme enough. And so I think when you have very clear guidelines on how to behave, and it's profitable, that's important because skepticism is profitable still, then you will conform to that.
I'm really surprised at the conformity of MGTOW, because I mean, I despite not being part of the skeptic community, I can cherry pick people who make rational and lucid sense. Yeah. Like I appreciate Computing Forever Dave's videos when he talks about some of the issues. I know I've probably gone down a few notches on your totem pole with that comment, but there's certain things that I can rationally appreciate bits of what he says, but I'm surprised with MGTOW how it needs to be a one-size-fits-all. Like, if you like this, for me it's kind of like, can't you think for yourself? Like, you're going your own way, so then you have no strings on you. You can kind of grab a piece from this community or this person. You can grab a piece from that community. Anything that rationally makes sense to you, you should be able to kind of make with what you will. So like the label in which they're under, I don't care. Like, if Hitler painted a great painting, I'd still say that, that was a great painting despite all the other stuff.
Oh yeah. Look, I mean, I just would disagree. I mean, I call him Dave the Imitator. He's just he just imitates Sargon. He's got the Is This a Thing series, which is basically an imitation of This Week in Stupid. I mean, he's not... I've had other dealings with him. It doesn't really matter. The point is that, I totally agree with your point. I can appreciate lots of things that emanate from some individual I otherwise wouldn't appreciate or like. They're channels I don't like, but then every now and then there's a video say, that's a good point. I mean, sure, yeah, why not? No problem with that.
I suppose I've got. I kind of I'm resistant to that whole anything closing in on me, or putting someone wrapping a coat of think this way. You can't sort of look outside here. I want to be able to freely turn over any rock I choose and see what I can gain from it.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, it's something to be said for that. But it is getting later here. It must be getting fairly late in the greatest shithole in Australia, as they say.
Yeah, we've strayed a little bit off topic, but it was great speaking to you, Stars.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'll be providing a link to huMAN's channel. I mean, he's such a giant by now that you probably don't need a link, but I will be providing one nonetheless. And gotta wish him luck in the great feminist and multicultural bastion that is Melbourne, Australia.
It's great material for what I'm doing. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's like going out in a soap opera, and soap operas everywhere, and you can kind of...
Oh, without fail, in my major two newspapers and on television, there is literally every single day at least one or two female-centric kind of, hissy fits or, histrionic sort of displays of, women are this and this is offensive, and it's every day. It's literally, it's easy to say, why don't you just go your own way and shut up? But I can't. I literally can't. I'm being hit in the face with it every day. Yeah, unless I actually stay indoors, don't switch on the internet, because even if I log out of Hotmail or some accounts, there's an ad invariably like popping up somewhere, and it's in your face all the time, and that's just here. So unless I don't leave my house, I'm subject to it in a small or great way.
Yeah, unfortunate. Well, we've covered a lot of material. I think the audience will appreciate that, and I will be linking to huMAN's channel, and go check it out. His videos are very pictorial and can capture the interest of many. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Stardust. Happy to be on.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.